Chapter 2161, Suppressing with a Snap. Feng was quite excited to have successfully summoned the Dark Tower. He had only ever heard of the tower in the past, he had never actually seen or experienced one. The Dark Seed was extremely rare in God's domain, even rarer than fragmented legendary items. Hence, Feng had been quite surprised when Bright Dawn had revealed the item. To summon a Dark Tower, players first needed to defeat the demon summoned with a Dark Seed. However, killing that particular demon was easier said than done. Players had often relied on NPCs to suppress and defeat these summoned demons during Feng's previous life. Killing one without such help was extremely difficult. Although the NPC's participation wouldn't interfere with the Dark Tower design's drop rate, NPCs wouldn't allow the construction to exist. They'd confiscate the Dark Tower design the moment it appeared, players wouldn't have a chance to get their hands on the item. Because of this, Feng could count the number of powers that had successfully summoned a Dark Tower on one hand. Moreover, outsiders weren't allowed within a tower or city that contained a Dark Tower. Only allied or subordinate guilds would be granted entry. Feng had merely been a second-rate guild's guild leader in his past. Even ordinary superpowers had been unreachable, not to mention top-ranked superpowers. They had simply lived in different worlds. Hence, Feng had never expected to summon a Dark Tower now. We don't have much time left, Guild Leader Black Flame. The allied superpower's 50,000-man army will arrive in less than half an hour, Yuan Tiexin reminded the younger man when he saw Feng's relaxed expression. From his point of view, Feng didn't seem to understand the danger they were in right now. The Dark Tower might be powerful, but one or two defensive structures wouldn't be enough to stop the enemy they were about to face. They're all here? Feng's smile brightened at the news. In that case, let's go meet them. Meet them? Yuan Tiexin was flabbergasted. Hurriedly, he asked, isn't that too dangerous? Even with Stone Forest City support, stopping them will be difficult. If we lose our terrain advantage, we'll be fish on the chopping block. With how much they have to gain, they won't hold back. Let's see them try, Feng said, laughing. This, Feng's very existence baffled Yuan Tiexin. He couldn't tell whether the swordsman was incredibly confident or just foolish. It's fine. I don't mind going by myself, Feng suggested once he noticed Yuan Tiexin's hesitation. That won't do. The secret pavilion is one of Stone Forest City's shareholders. Since you're going, Guild Leader Black Flame, how can I just stand by and watch? Besides, if the secret pavilion makes an appearance, these superpowers might hold back out of fear, maintaining some pretense, Yuan Tiexin said, shaking his head as he prepared to risk his life alongside Feng. He didn't think that meeting the various superpowers was altogether a bad idea. They hadn't reached Stone Forest City just yet, so they might have an opportunity to ally with a few of these invading superpowers. However, if they waited until the armies arrived and solidified their alliance, the secret pavilion and Zero Wing would lose any hope of holding the city. Following which, Feng and Yuan Tiexin left Stone Forest City and made their way toward the various superpowers' armies, which had just entered the Undead Forest. Both of these individuals were well known in the virtual gaming world at this point. Even if the various superpowers members weren't familiar with Zero Wing, they had heard of Black Flame. Why are they here? By the looks of it, they've come to negotiate. You're probably right. After all, we have 50,000 top-tier experts on our side. How could a recently promoted guild city possibly stop us? The various superpowers' forces were surprised to see Feng and Yuan Tiexin approach, discussing the matter amongst themselves. What is Black Flame trying to do? He actually wants to negotiate now? Illusory Words was astonished to see the two famous players emerge from between the trees. If they wanted to negotiate, they should have done so before the various superpowers' armies had gathered. Now that these superpowers had combined their forces, convincing any of them to switch sides would be practically impossible. After all, they now had the initiative. You actually have to ask? Crimson Gate replied with a sneer. He must have realized how terrifying this army is and realized that he isn't strong enough to stop us. He's probably here to try to recruit 3 or 4 superpowers. If he succeeds, he might be able to hold on to a fraction of Stone Forest City. Every superpower present shared the same thought. They couldn't think of any other reason that Feng would make such a risky move. If they killed Feng here, they'd deal a severe mental blow to Zero Wing as a whole. Doing so would also increase their members' morale, making it easier to capture Stone Forest City. Why are you here, Black Flame? If you're here to negotiate, I'd advise you to turn around. Of course, we'll let you leave safely if you obediently hand over Stone Forest City. Ultimately, we only want the city, not your pitiful lives. That's right. Give us Stone Forest City, and we'll let you leave with your lives. The superpower's upper echelons mocked Feng and Yuan Tiexin with playful, confident attitudes. Naturally, the idea that they'd let Zero Wing's members escape if Feng handed the city over was nothing more than a joke. Every player in God's domain had already heard of Zero Wing's provocation. If they did not make an example of the offending guild, how could they protect their reputations? Hand over Stone Forest City? Feng could not help but laugh. Aren't you quite full of yourselves? Every player fell silent when they heard Feng's comment. Even Yuan Tiexin stared at the swordsman, dumbfounded as he felt his stress peak. They weren't here to negotiate an alliance. What was going on? He even began to wonder if Feng understood their current predicament. They stood before an army of 50,000 players, all of which were experts among experts. If they worked together, killing a monster-level expert would be child's play. Yuan Tiexin's scalp tingled just from being the center of these experts' attention. He didn't even dare imagine what would happen if they started a fight with these players. Illusory Words, who stood among the joint army, was just as flabbergasted. She had seen many courageous people before, but this was the first time she had encountered anyone as bold as Feng. He had just openly provoked 12 superpowers with a simple comment. Only death awaited him now. Is this guy stupid? Does he really believe he's invincible? He's only defeated Starlink. He better not run once the battle truly begins. As the superpower's fury grew, Feng snapped his fingers. In response, Stone Forest Town's Dark Tower used its dark energy to manifest a vast darkness domain that enveloped the undead forest. All players within the domain, both friend and foe, felt an immense weight drag at their bodies, losing more than half of their combat power. Chapter 2162, No Different from Ants. Everyone panicked as the abrupt pressure swept through the undead forest. What's going on? Why have my attributes decreased? It's so hard to move. What did he do? After noticing the change, everyone focused on Feng in fear and confusion. Even a fool would realize that Feng was responsible, but more than 50,000 players had gathered, easily occupying an area of several thousand yards. Not even a Tier 4 large-scale destruction spell could encompass such a large area. However, not only did a faint layer of dark gas collect around them, but it also covered the entire undead forest. Ordinary domain skills only reduced players' basic attributes by a small fraction, but this domain suppression was extreme. Their movements were so sluggish that they were even less mobile than they had been at Tier 1. The various superpowers' upper echelons watched the man responsible with grim expressions. If only their basic attributes had been suppressed, they may have been able to adapt. However, it was an entirely different story if this domain suppressed their physiques as well. Experts were so powerful due to their quick reactions and extraordinary comprehension, which gave them far greater control over their virtual bodies than ordinary players. However, now that their bodies had reverted to their original, mortal state, they had lost their advantages. In other words, they were only as strong as ordinary players while inside this domain. The ability is just as effective as the rumors made it out to be. When Feng sensed the changes to his own body, he could not help his rueful sigh. As an advanced construction, the Dark Tower had 2 abilities. One of these abilities was Darkness Domain. The darkness domain did not differentiate between friend and foe, affecting every creature within its range, covering a 100,000-yard radius. Violent dark energy filled the domain. Not only would this dark energy affect creatures' basic attributes, but it would also impact their reaction speeds, neural response times, and five senses. While bathed in this dark energy, expert players would lose all of their advantages over ordinary players. It was just as effective as a death sentence. This was also why players in the past had referred to the Dark Tower as the Tower of Death. Yuan Tiexin's eyes nearly fell from their sockets. He was even more astounded than the invading Superpower's members. He had been following Feng around all this time, so he understood what the man had done perfectly. What is this construction? How is it so powerful? Yuan Tiexin could not help but turn, his gaze settling on the Dark Tower in the distance. Although he had recognized that the Dark Tower was extraordinary, he hadn't realized how truly horrifying it could be. The Dark Tower could actually level the playing field between expert and ordinary players. Ordinary players might not realize how amazing that was, but to the various superpowers, it was devastating. A large part of the reason for the superpowers' great strength was the number of quality of their experts, which far surpassed ordinary players. If one removed experts from the equation, then the various superpowers were simply wealthier and larger than their ordinary counterparts. The Dark Tower's ability would even allow an ordinary power to face off against a superpower. Although superpowers had more members than ordinary powers, they had to manage far more territory, and as a result, they could only station a limited number of players to each area under their control. There was also the fact that every location had limited resources. Even if a superpower wanted to, they couldn't afford to send all of their members to a single location. Doing so would negatively affect their development. Because of this, there really wouldn't be a major difference between superpowers and ordinary powers when it came to numbers. This was why the Dark Tower was only second to peak constructions. The tower would have qualified as a peak construction if it recognizes friend from foe. Moreover, it would have been one of the most powerful defensive structures in the game. As Feng's gaze rested on each of them, fear began to overwhelm the superpower's members. The ability to transform 50,000 expert players into ordinary mortals was simply unheard of. However, the various upper echelons quickly stepped forward to salvage the situation. Do you think we only plan to rely on our expert players, Black Flame? That's right. You might have suppressed our experts, but we have more than players to besiege Stone Forest City. If Starlink could employ 3 mythic monsters and a dark seed, why wouldn't superpowers of their caliber be able to do anything less? Even if their expert players had lost their strength, their guilds could still launch a terrifying assault if they worked together. However, these threats were empty. In truth, they lost any intention of attacking the city. Even if they used everything in their arsenals to attack Stone Forest Town, they'd pay a high price to capture the city without the ability to rely on their experts. None of them could afford this outcome. It seems that it won't be long before another superpower rises in God's domain, Illusory Word said, smiling bitterly at Feng's serene expression. Recognizing that none of these superpowers had any desire to take action, it was clear that capturing Stone Forest City was no longer possible. They were merely trying to salvage what little pride they had left, hoping to gain a little profit off of Zero Wing through intimidation. Now that Zero Wing would hold Stone Forest City, it was guaranteed to become a superpower very soon. Crimson Emperor had strived over several decades to become a super first-rate guild. Zero Wing, however, was on the cusp of becoming one after just a couple of months, and that success was purely due to Feng. To think Stone Forest Town has such an ability. It's no wonder why he dared to approach us. Even Crimson Gate looked upon Feng with envy and admiration. He had lost any desire to refute illusory words. After all, she only spoke the truth. The conditions to become a superpower were not as harsh as those required of a super first-rate guild. As long as a superpower had enough financial strength and experts, it could rise as a superpower. As for a complete legacy, that wasn't very important. Now, as long as Zero Wing offered a portion of Stone Forest City's benefits, the various superpowers would withdraw, and the guild would retain the city's shares. Naturally, the city would generate astounding profits with the benefits it could offer, and based on the strength and potential Zero Wing had displayed, it would attract many powerful corporations interested in investing in a guild. Zero Wing would easily fulfill the financial requirement to become a superpower. Of course, it could amass enough experts with money. However, as Crimson Gate fell silent, Feng took the stage once more. "Since you still refuse to leave, you can remain here forever," Feng said as he revealed a 7 luminaries crystal, activating the Dark Tower's second ability. Demon God's Phantom. The 7 luminaries crystal immediately turned to dust, and a gigantic magic array formed beneath Feng's feet. The array released an endless stream of dark energy that enveloped Feng. After a short moment, a 10-meter-tall giant emerged from the black smoke. It wore pitch-black armor, and 2 icy, blue flames flickered through the gap in the giant's helmet. The giant's horrific aura bathed its surroundings in death and cold. Chapter 2163, Ancient God's Descent. Although the demon god Feng had transformed into was only 10 meters tall, a far cry from the size of Grand Lord and mythic-ranked monsters, everyone gasped when they saw his new form. The aura Feng radiated was far too powerful. If an ordinary mythic monster's aura was seawater, Feng's was steel. Most of the experts in the Superpower's army couldn't even move when Feng's aura washed over them. To them, the swordsman felt like an ancient god that had just stepped onto the mortal plane. They were afraid and awestruck. None of them even dared to consider resisting this man. How is this possible? As the various superpowers' upper echelons took in Feng's new form, who loomed like the incarnation of an ancient god, they felt more than just the unprecedented pressure, they also felt their life ratings suppressed. Not even archaic species-ranked monsters radiated such an intense pressure. These upper echelons felt as if the person before them wasn't a player at all, but a true god. Tier 4? Just how many cards has he hidden? Yuan Tianxin was utterly flabbergasted when he saw Feng's new form. For a moment, he even wondered if he were dreaming. Although the darkness domain Feng had activated was horrific, it was insignificant compared to this ability. After all was said and done, might was right in God's domain. Take the great demon Malphins, for example. The various superpowers hadn't even dared to set foot in the undead forest due to the great demon's presence, yet even after they had been swallowed by the darkness domain, they had remained adamant of taking a cut of Stone Forest City. However, now that Feng had transformed into a Tier 4 being, he posed an even greater threat to these superpowers than the great demon Malphins. By this stage of the game, expert players had realized how frightening the tier system was. Even at the same level, a 1-tier difference resulted in a massive combat power boost, not to mention a 2-tier difference. The gap between their combat powers now was like the difference between heaven and earth. Moreover, the more familiar an expert player was with their Tier 2 body, the more acutely they understood the power of tiers. This was no longer a matter of basic attributes, but the extraordinary boost to players' physique. Even if 2 players had the same basic attributes and combat standards, a Tier 2 player could easily defeat a Tier 1 player. Naturally, the higher the tier, the greater the tier's physique boost would be. Right now, Feng was a bona fide Tier 4 player. His physique had reached an unimaginable level. Even if his basic attributes were no higher than the rest of these players, he could likely slay a domain realm expert as if he were slaughtering helpless sheep. Furthermore, Feng had the basic attributes of a Tier 4 player. To ordinary players, Feng's transformation might not seem like much. The various superpowers had already slain many Tier 4 mythic monsters by now. How hard would it be to kill a Tier 4 player? However, these superpowers members knew better. A mythic monster was cute compared to a Tier 4 player. Unlike monsters, players could use the full potential of their strength. Some players could even surpass their limits in combat. Players also possessed a large number of skills, and most importantly, they knew how to fight other players. They wouldn't give their opponents time to prepare, nullifying attacks as soon as they had the chance. Tier 4. How does Zero Wing have such a foundation? Crimson Gate's eyes nearly fell from their sockets as he stared at Feng from afar. A one-tier difference resulted in such a massive combat power gap. Now that Feng had a two-tier advantage, he was basically invincible. He could kill tier 2 players as easily as stepping on ants. You win this time, Black Flame. We'll retreat. The Superpower's upper echelons realized that they had no hope of capturing Stone Forest City after seeing Feng's transformation. Retreat was their only option left. I gave you a chance to leave, yet you refused. Why would I let you walk away now? Feng asked as he took a step forward, his massive body instantly appearing 30 yards away. He then dashed for the joint army. Don't push your luck, Black Flame. Although we aren't a match for you, we are also capable of dispatching tier 4 mythic combatants. If we focus on assaulting Stone Forest City, neither of us will benefit. That's right. Moreover, do you really want our guilds as your enemies? Feng's bloodlust enraged the various superpowers' upper echelons. They were overlords in God's domain. Although Feng's tier 4 combat power was daunting, it was only a matter of time before they gained their own tier 4 players. Feng could only retain his arrogance for a short time. They were already expressing a lot of respect for Zero Wing with their willingness to withdraw. Yet, Feng had no sense of propriety and wanted to kill them. So what if I do? Feng said, sneering as he increased his speed. He would have feared the various superpowers' wrath if he hadn't acquired the Dark Tower for Stone Forest City. It was true that as time passed, these superpowers would find more treasures and grow stronger. However, with the Dark Tower's protection, no power could threaten Feng's city before players reached level 100, and God's domain's rare resources were limited. The competition for these resources would only become increasingly intense. It was only a matter of time before Zero Wing had to face these superpowers. Since the various superpowers would become his guild's enemies sooner or later, he might as well kill some of their members now, weakening his enemies and strengthening his guild. Black Flame. You're courting death. The superpowers' upper echelons immediate retrieved the fruits of their respective guilds' labor, revealing one mythic combatant after another. These tier 4 mythic combatants were either summoned creatures or came in the form of tools like the combat puppets. In moments, 15 mythic combatants had joined the battlefield. A force of this magnitude would be enough to intimidate any superpower. One could easily capture a guild town with just 5 or 6 of these mythic combatants, yet now, these superpowers had worked together to amass a force of 15 of them. Even destroying a superpower's nurtured basic city wouldn't pose much of a problem with such a force. Of the 15 mythic combatants, 6 moved to surround Feng, while the remaining 9 charged towards Stone Forest City. The Zero Wing and Secret Pavilion members in the city paled as they watched these beings run toward them. 3 mythic monsters had been enough to shake Stone Forest City's defensive magic array, but now, 9 creatures with similar combat power were heading their way. Black Flame, you will pay for your foolishness. The various superpowers' upper echelons sneered as they controlled their mythic monsters to charge at Stone Forest City at full speed. Are you so sure about that? Feng asked, swinging his sword at the 9 mythic combatants before they could split up to attack independently. Shadow Blade. 9 shadowy blades collided with the mythic combatants, effortlessly slicing through them, before the beings flew through the air and slammed into the ground some distance away. How is this possible? The superpowers members gaped in shock. Those were mythic combatants they were talking about, and Feng had defeated 9 of them so easily. Despite how much they wanted the scene to be an illusion, they had no choice but to acknowledge the truth before them. After resolving the threat against Stone Forest City, Feng turned and swung his sword at the 6 remaining mythic combatants. Swords Transmigration. This time, 2 of the 6 mythic combatants, which had been thrown, sustained severe injuries, and their combat powers plummeted. Although the exchange had been brief, everyone understood that the 15 mythic combatants were no match for Feng. They couldn't even get past the swordsman, much less destroy Stone Forest City. They had sorely underestimated Feng's combat power. Chapter 2164, Devil. Every player was overwhelmed with shock and horror after watching Feng toy with 15 mythic combatants like they were infants. Although they had known that a Tier 4 player would be more powerful than a mythic monster, they hadn't expected Feng to be this strong. Logically, a Tier 4 player's combat power should only be slightly greater than a mythic monster's. Once they reached the Tier 4 standard, monsters' combat power rose to a new level. Including monsters' natural attribute advantage, Tier 4 players of the same level should have a hard time facing 3 or 4 mythic monsters at the same time. However, Feng had suppressed 15 mythic combatants with little to no effort. It was simply unbelievable. Of course, Feng wasn't particularly surprised. Activating Demon God's Phantom cost a 7 luminaries crystal. Moreover, its user could only activate the skill once a day, and it only lasted 4 short hours. During that time, the skill would forcibly elevate the target player by 2 tiers to a maximum of Tier 4 peak rank. The skill also upgraded a player's life rating to Ancien Fiend at maximum. Because of Feng's normal tier and life rating, Demon God's Phantom could only elevate him to Tier 4 upper rank, which was still far from the skill's maximum. Normally, only Tier 3 players could exhibit the skill's full potential. Even so, a Tier 4 upper rank player's combat power was more than enough to take out 15 mythic combatants. God's Domain hadn't launched that long ago, and players hadn't yet reached Tier 3, so they had no idea what happened at that tier and beyond. Tier 4 players had still been considered peak experts even a decade after God's Domain's launch. Ordinary second-rate guilds hadn't even had any Tier 4 players in their ranks, and in first-rate guilds, Tier 4 players had been upper echelons, tasked with safeguarding the guild's neutral towns. Once players reached Tier 4, their combat power would undergo a qualitative transformation with each minor threshold they crossed. It was like the difference between ordinary monsters and ancient fiends. Although these superpowers had summoned quite a few Tier 4 combatants, all 15 of them were at the lower rank. They weren't even Tier 4 intermediate rank. How were they supposed to defeat a Tier 4 upper rank player? Purely comparing combat power, Feng was only slightly weaker than Malfin's when the Great Demon had been at his peak. Hence, killing 15 Tier 4 lower rank combatants wasn't an issue for Feng in this state. Because of the skill's limited duration, Feng had no plans to drag out this fight. He immediately and violently attacked one of the summoned mythic monsters. With the huge difference between their combat power, the mythic monster was utterly powerless against Feng, and every one of the swordsman's attacks obliterated a visible chunk of the monster's HP. The mythic monster's HP fell by 20% after a few seconds. At this rate, Feng would finish it off in less than a minute. Zero Wing's rise is guaranteed now. Illusory Words sighed ruefully as she watched the mythic monster rapidly lose HP from a safe distance. 15 mythic combatants. Facing such a force would be a disaster to any superpower, yet they couldn't even pose a threat to Feng. Now, it was clear that capturing Stone Forest City was impossible for any superpower. With the city under its control, Zero Wing would have no issues acquiring resources or funds for its development. If Crimson Emperor hadn't been so greedy and negotiated with Zero Wing before Malfin's death, it might not have secured Stone Forest City's shares, but it could have secured some discounts and shops within the city. Unfortunate the guild would have to leave empty-handed. In contrast, the powers that had formed a close relationship with Zero Wing were truly blessed, especially Unyielding Soul. With Stone Forest City's help, Unyielding Soul could stand on the same stage as Starlink in the Dark Knight Empire in the future. Retreat. Everyone, retreat immediately. With one of the mythic monsters so close to death, the superpower's upper echelons hastily commanded a retreat. If not even their mythic combatants stood a chance against that monstrous swordsman, their players wouldn't fare any better. Feng was still occupied with the 15 mythic combatants. If they waited until these beings died, they would lose their chance to escape. As soon as the upper echelons issued the command, the army of 50,000 experts spread out and ran for the Undead Forest's exit. They're finally retreating. Yuan Tianxin released a sigh of relief as he watched the invading players flee. Although he understood that these superpowers had lost any hope of capturing Stone Forest City the moment Feng had proven capable of single-handedly suppressing 15 mythic combatants, he couldn't help his shock at watching the 50,000 peak experts run for their lives. Don't think you can get away so easily. Noticing the fleeing players, Feng threw the mythic combatants around him with a powerful blow before charging at the escaping army. Mythic combatants might be powerful, but even they would need quite some time to destroy Stone Forest City's defensive magic arrays. Moreover, these mythic combatants had been summoned with consumable items. They were as good as lost. Even if he killed them, the invading superpowers wouldn't suffer any more than they already had. Furthermore, these mythic beings wouldn't drop any items when they died. But an army of players was a different story. Even within their superpowers, these players were experts among experts. The offending superpowers would suffer dearly if these experts died. Since the various superpowers had banded together to attack Stone Forest City once already, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't do it again. Naturally, he needed to teach them a painful lesson to ensure they wouldn't cause trouble in the future. Black Flame. Do you really want to become our enemy? The superpowers' upper echelons panicked as they watched Feng dash toward them. They began to reveal one card after another, activating suppression and defensive magic arrays to slow Feng down. Some even used Tier 4 offensive magic scrolls against the incoming swordsman. So what if I do? Feng replied with a sneer, showing no intention of stopping. Whether it was magic arrays or Tier 4 offensive spells, all were useless against Feng. Current players simply couldn't hope to contend with a Tier 4 upper-rank existence. Feng brandished his swords, countering the magic arrays and incoming spells with a few hits. They then proceeded toward the fleeing mass of players, ruthlessly massacring everyone in his path. Even at their peak, these expert players were no match for Feng, but suppressed by the Dark Tower, they were utterly powerless. Lunatic. How is that a lunatic? He's practically the devil incarnate. He'll definitely regret this. The superpowers experts were horrified as they watched Feng slaughter their allies. They couldn't believe that this player actually dared to attack so many superpowers at the same time. Not even the secret pavilion would be so bold. On the other hand, Zero Wing's members in Stone Forest City felt their excitement and joy reach a tipping point. Reverence for their guild leader overwhelmed them, and their pride as members of Zero Wing reached new heights. All hail the guild leader. Our guild leader is invincible. One man suppressed 15 mythic combatants. One man made 50,000 experts flee for their lives. Who else in God's domain could possibly accomplish such a spectacular feat? Chapter 2165, Tide Changes. Dark Night Empire, Dark Night City. Vendors' cries filled the business district. Practically every item for sale was of exquisite quality. Many of the vendors sold level 60+ fine gold weapons and equipment, Tier 2 skill books, and powerful master potions. Players who were visiting the city for the first time were mesmerized by all of the precious items for sale. Dark Night City is amazing, Big Brother Ape. So many treasures are available for sale. A lot of vendors are even selling a wide variety of super rare Tier 2 skill books. We'll be lucky to find any of these books in Ghost Rock City. A level 55 female elementalist named Flashy Leaf expressed her surprise and joy as she gazed at the various stalls hawking the tomes for magical classes. In God's domain, magical classes were easier to control than melee classes. The spells they wielded affected a large portion of their combat power. In comparison, melee classes didn't depend as much on their skills. That is only natural. This is the Dark Knight Empire's imperial capital, and a large number of experts visit the city. Naturally, this city has more resources than our city. With enough coins and magic crystals, you can even buy level 65 dark gold weapons and equipment. There is simply no comparison between Dark Knight City and an ordinary NPC city, Sweeping Ape, a level 62 male guardian knight with a silver shield, replied, chuckling. You can even buy level 65 dark gold weapons here? Flashy Leaf muttered in shock. Although many players had already surpassed level 60, monsters' drop rates was significantly lower after level 50 due to God's domain settings. As a result, weapons and equipment above level 50 were extremely rare, especially secret, silver rank and above. Now, such high-quality equipment was a status symbol for expert and wealthy players. Most ordinary players would be limited to bronze and mysterious iron equipment after level 50. Take Flashy Leaf, for example. She had only secured a full set of level 55 secret silver equipment due to her low level, and it had still cost her a lot of money to collect the whole set. She couldn't even imagine using level 65 dark gold weapons and equipment. Of course. However, you'll need a strong relationship with a large guild to get access to those items, Sweeping Ape replied. Proudly, he continued, our Eagle Eye Adventurer team is a well-known adventurer team in Dark Knight City, and we have a connection to a few first and second-rate guilds. Now that you're a member of our adventurer team, Leaf, you can get your hands on one or two of these items if you save up enough coins and magic crystals. Moreover, you can tell any guild players you have trouble with in the fields that you're from Eagle Eye, and even first-rate guild players will step back out of respect. Suddenly, a commotion erupted on the street. Players moved aside, opening a spacious path as mounted players dashed through. Nobody dared to step in this group's path. They all acted as if they were watching a royal procession. These people dare to ride their mounts here? Flashy Leaf was astonished as she watched these players dash down the street atop their mounts. On the way here, Sweeping Ape had constantly reminded her that players were forbidden from using their mounts in Dark Knight City, and just as he had said, she hadn't seen a single mounted player within the city walls thus far. However, such a large group thundered through the business district on their mounts now. They are an exception, Sweeping Ape said, fear lacing his words as he watched the mounted group continue down the street. Why? Flashy Leaf asked. They're Starlink's members, this city's overlord. Not even super first-rate guilds like Crimson Emperor and Unyielding Soul are a match for Starlink, Sweeping Awe said in awe. Although, even Starlink's members normally walk in the city. However, a masked, level 65 ranger flashed the Guardian Knight a disdainful look when he saw Sweeping Ape's glowing excitement. King. Maybe it had been in the past, the level 65 ranger said, chuckling. Those players are in such a hurry because Zero Wing has successfully defended Stone Forest City. Starlink's status in the ancient undead country has been threatened. I doubt it will be long before Stone Forest City replaces Starlink's fortress as the most popular spot in the neutral map. Replace Starlink? How is that, posse? Sweeping Ape instinctively tried to rebuke the masked ranger and mock the man for his ignorance, but when he saw the black tiger logo on the ranger's cape, he snapped his jaws shut. The Evil Tiger Adventurer Team? The Dark Knight Empire had countless adventurer teams, which rose and fell at a moment's notice. The Evil Tiger Adventurer Team, however, had survived in the Dark Knight Empire since God's Domain's launch. It was also the Empire's publicly acknowledged third-ranked adventurer team. Even first-rate guilds' guild leaders treated its members with respect. The Evil Tiger Adventurer Team was leagues above the Eagle Eye Adventurer Team. You'll find out if it's possible or not soon enough, but I'd advise that you begin to prepare. Major changes are coming to the Dark Knight Empire, the masked ranger said as he glanced at Sweeping Ape and Flashy Leaf. He turned away from the two and continued on his way. Big Brother Ape, is he telling the truth? Flashy Leaf asked, noticing how Sweeping Ape watched the masked ranger with awe. Evil Tiger is a peak adventurer team. There are rumors that quite a few super first-rate guilds have extended olive branches to the team. Many of Evil Tiger's members are also acquainted with players from super first-rate guilds, so its information network is far better than ours. I suspect he was telling the truth, Sweeping Ape said as he watched the masked ranger's departing figure. Zero Wing? What kind of guild is that, Big Brother Ape? If it's actually capable of making Starlink so afraid, could it be a super first-rate guild as well? Flashy Leaf asked curiously. She was completely ignorant of the virtual gaming world. She had only joined this world out of curiosity since God's domain had become so popular. The moment she had joined God's domain, she had realized that there was no going back. This, uncertainly, Sweeping Ape said, I recall that Zero Wing is a new guild, strong enough to rival first-rate guilds. A new guild? Does that mean we have a chance of joining it? Flashy Leaf asked. Maybe. Sweeping Ape turned to Flashy Leaf, speechless. He had gone to great lengths to recruit Flashy Leaf for the Eagle Eye Adventurer team, and now, she was interested in joining Zero Wing. While Dark Knight City's players discussed the prior commotion and latest news, the various large guilds' residences in the Empire had fallen into utter chaos. Not long ago, they had learned that Zero Wing had defeated the various superpowers' joint army, slaying more than 10,000 expert players and solidifying its position in Stone Forest City. Chapter 2166, War's Conclusion. Star Moon Kingdom, Star Moon City. One team after another appeared in the teleportation hall, all comprised of level 65 or above experts. Even the weakest piece of equipment on these experts was level 60 secret silver rank. However, these players didn't linger in Star Moon City's teleportation hall, quickly moving to other platforms and teleporting to the kingdom's other cities. With careful observation, one would recognize these players as adventurer team members. Many were even from well-known adventurer teams. Other players in the teleportation hall were stupefied. They didn't understand why so many adventurer teams from other kingdoms and empires were visiting Star Moon Kingdom. While Star Moon City's players wondered about the odd flood of adventurer team players, a level 67 man sat in a top-floor VIP room in one of the teleportation hall's advanced restaurants. Quietly, he took this all in, envy and sorrow in his gaze. If the city's players saw this man, they'd likely be taken aback. He was none other than Galaxy Past, the Star Alliance's guild leader. By this point, the Star Alliance had become Star Moon City's king. After this battle's conclusion, it's likely impossible for anyone to pressure Zero Wing within Star Moon Kingdom, Galaxy Past enviously lamented as he watched the numerous teams teleport in and out of the teleportation hall. Feng had recently defeated the various superpowers' joint army, and news of his victory had yet to reach Star Moon Kingdom's general populace. However, as one of the secret pavilion's subordinate first-rate guilds, the Star Alliance had heard of the outcome almost as soon as the battle had ended. He certainly hadn't expected this outcome. He truly hadn't thought that Zero Wing would be capable of standing against such a force. Zero Wing's Stone Forest City was akin to a diamond mine. The troublesome guild would never have to worry about needing funds again. With the city's income, Zero Wing could easily support its current level of development, which meant it had resolved its sole weakness within Star Moon Kingdom. From now on, even the various superpowers would find it exceedingly difficult to pressure the guild in its own kingdom. Moreover, doing so wouldn't gain them much. At this point, he'd be hard-pressed to find a superpower that was willing to make such a trade. First-rate guilds like the Star Alliance dreamed of achieving such power, but now, a new guild, one that had only established after God's Domain's launch, had been the one to realize this dream. No one could have imagined that Zero Wing would have struck back as soon as Starlink had tried to hinder the guild's development in Star Moon Kingdom and successfully deal such a fierce blow. Starlink's fortress in the ancient undead country was basically crippled. Even if that is the case, guild leader, Zero Wing will have more problems to deal with now. Honestly, Starlink hadn't taken Zero Wing seriously, but now, with Stone Forest City in its way, Starlink will view the Zero Wing as a sworn enemy. Moreover, Zero Wing has provoked more than a handful of superpowers this time. I doubt the guild will find moving forward to be more difficult than expected, Purple Jade said. Galaxy Past did not try to refute Purple Jade's logic. In his opinion, Zero Wing's retaliation against Starlink's bullying had been splendidly carried out. Even before Zero Wing had taken action, the two guilds had shed all pretenses. Increasing their hatred for each other wouldn't change things over much. However, the fact that Zero Wing had slaughtered the superpowers' joint forces would come back to bite it. Those superpowers might be helpless against Stone Forest City and Zero Wing, but the Undead Forest was a small fraction of the bottomless abyss. The God Mode regional dungeon had other areas, and exploring those areas would require particularly powerful experts. The various superpowers had both stronger and more experts than Zero Wing. Once Zero Wing's members left the forest, they'd find miserable deaths waiting for them. While the various powers in the kingdom discussed Zero Wing's victory, adventurer teams crowded the entrance to the guild's residence in White River City. Just entering and leaving the residence had become a struggle for Zero Wing's members. Aqua Rose, who was responsible for the guild's recruitment, was stunned. She had watched many expert players apply for membership before, but she had never seen this many apply at once. A rough estimate calculated more than 10,000 expert applicants. Moreover, quite a few of these experts were at the half-step refinement realm, and some were even refinement realm experts. The guild hadn't experienced such a thing before. Half-step refinement realm experts generally served as core team leaders in first-rate guilds. Most refinement realm experts were immediately promoted, becoming an upper echelon within the first-rate guild. Even Aqua Rose was only a refinement realm expert. However, despite knowing that they would, at most, start out as an elite member, so many refinement realm experts were adamant about joining Zero Wing. "What kind of magic did you use, guild leader?" Aqua Rose excitedly asked after contacting Feng. More than 300 well-known and 20 top adventurer teams have applied to join the guild. After a rough estimate, more than 200 half-step refinement realm experts and 15 refinement realm experts have applied, as well. Zero Wing didn't even have 15 refinement realm experts in total. Even so, the guild had far more than its first-rate competition. By accepting these 15 or so refinement realm experts into the fold, Zero Wing could double its total count. If it succeeded in doing so, no ordinary first-rate guild would have a chance against Zero Wing. Only the few top-ranked first-rate guilds would be able to rival the guild. Over 200 half-step and 15 refinement realm experts? It seems the battle's outcome has been quite effective, Feng said, smiling. He wasn't particularly surprised by the situation. His latest battle held extraordinary significance. Although, defeating the superpowers' joint forces wasn't the victory that lured all of these adventurer teams to Zero Wing, rather, they were attracted by his success in holding Stone Forest City. As long as Stone Forest City stood, Zero Wing would have a steady supply of resources and coins. This also made Zero Wing a far tougher opponent for the various superpowers. Moreover, to become a superpower, one needed a foundation of money and resources. Now that Zero Wing had that foundation, it was almost guaranteed to become a superpower in the future, and the guild had already proven capable of fending off the various superpowers. After hearing the news of these victories, it was only natural that a large number of experts would rush to join the guild and ride Zero Wing's coattails. Some top adventurer teams have also requested an alliance, committing to fight our enemies in the bottomless abyss. With a little hesitation, Aqua Rose continued, however, they want adventurer residences in Stone Forest City in exchange. Top adventurer teams possessed a lot of experts, and some were even led by refinement realm experts. There were also some that even superpowers feared. Meanwhile, Zero Wing had provoked quite a few superpowers this time, and because of that, it was fated to encounter many trials and tribulations within the regional dungeon. If the guild had to face these superpowers alone, it would likely struggle to establish itself in the bottomless abyss's other locations. It might even be trapped in the undead forest, which was only a fraction of the dungeon and had very limited resources. If they want adventurer residences for free, they can forget it, Feng said, shaking his head. Of course, if they're willing to pay, it's a different story. Each adventurer residence will cost 50,000 gold or magic crystals of equal value. Adventurer residences were similar to guilds' temporary residences. The team's members would be able to teleport in and out of Stone Forest City freely, but adventurer residences were a special type of building that could only be constructed in guild cities. Moreover, the ruling power could only construct a limited number. A basic city could only support 10 adventurer residences at a time. 5,000 gold? The amount Feng demanded startled Aqua Rose. Are you sure? One could afford a relatively good plot of land in an imperial capital with so much gold. Charging so much for an adventurer residence in a guild city was absurd. No adventurer team would likely agree to that price. That's right, 50,000 gold. If they're not interested, we won't force the issue, Feng firmly declared. I understand. I'll notify them of our price. Knowing Feng had made up his mind, Aqua Rose could only nod and agree. She could only hope that more opportunities to secure outside help appeared in the future. After disconnecting the call, Feng made his way to Stone Forest City's City Lord's mansion to open the city's doors to the public. This was also why the various superpowers had tried to capture Stone Forest City so soon after its promotion. The City Lord's mansion was still undeveloped and at its weakest. Once Zero Wing fully developed the mansion, not even Tier 5 players could infiltrate it. Although he had defeated the various superpowers and defended Stone Forest City this time, repelling future attacks wasn't guaranteed. He needed to upgrade the city as soon as possible. Initially, the secret pavilion had suggested they wait for 2 or 3 days before opening Stone Forest City to the public. By then, most of the city's defenses would be operational. However, the secret pavilion wasn't aware that Feng couldn't afford to wait that long. Silverwing Town, Stone Forest City, and Zero Wing's development desperately needed coins and resources, but due to the ongoing war with Starlink, Zero Wing severely lacked both. Even though Feng had acquired quite a few top-tier weapons and equipment pieces from the various superpowers, it was a pitiful amount compared to what the guild needed, and selling the items would simply be foolish. Hence, to ensure Zero Wing's future, he had to open Stone Forest City to the public as soon as possible. Feng soon arrived at the 3-story house within the compound. An elderly butler, the City Lord's mansion's manager, waited for him. Although the old man was only level 10, he was invulnerable, no player could damage him. City Lord, how may I be of service? The butler asked as he greeted Feng with a smile. I wish to remove the seal on Stone Forest City, Feng answered. After its promotion, Stone Forest City had been sealed. Without the owner's permission, players would have to destroy the city's defensive magic array and walls to get into the city. If he wanted to attract visitors, he'd have to remove the seal. I will see to it immediately, but once the seal has been lifted, how much would my lord like to charge as an entry fee? The butler asked. With Stone Forest City's current scale, the lowest entry fee available to you is 40 copper coins. The lowest is 40 copper? Feng could not help but chuckle. What about the highest? He had gone to great lengths to relocate Stone Forest Town to the bottomless abyss. He had even upgraded it into a city. Naturally, he couldn't charge the lowest entry fee. Currently, you can collect up to 3 silver per person. If you wish to raise the entry fee further, you will first have to upgrade the city, the butler explained. In that case, set it to 3 silver, Feng decided without hesitation. Players couldn't set a city's entry fee to any amount they desired in God's domain. There were lower and upper limits, and the city's geographical surroundings and development determined these limits. When Zero Wing City had first established, the lower limit had only been 30 copper, yet Stone Forest City's was 40 copper. To attract more players to Zero Wing City, Feng had initially set the entry fee to the minimum, gradually raising it as more players arrived. Now, players had to pay 80 copper to enter Zero Wing City. However, Stone Forest City's situation was different. It rested on the bottomless abyss's first underground floor, and it was almost guaranteed that only a small number of players would visit. Unfortunately, that meant that he couldn't choose the lowest entry fee available. He wouldn't make any money if he did. Furthermore, Stone Forest City was the only rest area in the God Mode regional dungeon, and unlike Zero Wing City, this city was essential for the players that wanted to grind in the area. Understood. I'll get it done immediately. The butler bowed before leaving. In less than 5 minutes, a regional system announcement alerted all players in the Undead Forest that Stone Forest City was officially open. Chapter 2168, Not like a superpower, but superior. Once the seal on Stone Forest City had lifted, Feng began to draft a construction plan for the city. Although Stone Forest Town had already contained a lot of buildings, it had grown several times after its promotion. As a result, Stone Forest City looked empty and could, at most, only accommodate 1 million players. This was the downside to a promoted city. A built city, on the other hand, didn't have this problem. Although Stone Forest Town had more than enough buildings to accommodate visiting players, its visitors wouldn't be limited to experts as mainstream players reached higher levels and improved their equipment. Eventually, even ordinary players would be able to grind in the bottomless abyss's first floor with ease. It was necessary to plan the city's constructions ahead of time to ensure that players had what they needed to live and rest in Stone Forest City. Not only would careful planning increase the value of the city's shops and private housing, but it was also of the utmost importance for the city's development. While Feng planned the city's layout in the City Lord's mansion, the powers from the kingdoms and empires near the ancient Undead Forest received news of Stone Forest City's grand opening. For a time, these powers were in an uproar. Zero Wing is actually opening such a precious city to the public? Has the guild gone mad? How generous. That's a god mode regional dungeon we're talking about. I can't believe Zero Wing is letting just anyone into the city. Just what is Zero Wing thinking? The many powers that had watched the battle for Stone Forest City knew how significant the city was. Whoever owned Stone Forest City would have a massive advantage when exploring the bottomless abyss. However, Zero Wing so willingly gave up this advantage, granting the public access to such a valuable city. Even the various superpowers were stunned by Zero Wing's decision. They had known that the guild would open Stone Forest City to the public sooner or later. Reaching the bottomless abyss's first floor wasn't particularly difficult, and even experts from first-rate guilds and peak adventurer teams would be strong enough to grind in the area after another 10 days or so. Once they were, Stone Forest City wouldn't be nearly as much of an advantage. Even if Zero Wing wanted to avoid doing so, it would have to open the city to the public to earn a little money. The city's potential income would be far more important to the guild than limiting access to its members and allies. However, the various superpowers hadn't dreamed that Zero Wing would open Stone Forest City's gates so soon. Essentially, doing so now was throwing away any advantage the city could provide. A god mode regional dungeon? This is a perfect opportunity to strengthen our adventurer team. Zero Wing is truly amazing. It's giving up such a massive advantage. Not even superpowers would dare to make such a sacrifice. Since no one's explored the bottomless abyss yet, we can advance our guild's development if we can claim some of its treasures for ourselves. The various kingdoms and empires' powers sprung into action the moment they heard of Stone Forest City's opening. They all dispatched expert teams to the city. The various superpowers occupied most of God's domain's high-resource maps, and that should have been the case for the bottomless abyss as well. Superpowers had far better weapons and equipment for their members than ordinary powers, and by the time the ordinary powers were able to explore the regional dungeon, the various superpowers would have likely combed through the dungeon. Now that Stone Forest City was open to the public, however, ordinary powers could share the starting line with the various superpowers in the competition for the bottomless abyss's resources. Although the superpowers still had a massive advantage in terms of combat power and equipment standards, it was the fairest condition that ordinary players could hope for. If these ordinary powers got lucky in the bottomless abyss, they might be able to elevate their development to a new level. The regional dungeon was the current frontline in God's domain, and needless to say, the loot within would be among the best available at this stage of the game. Zero Wing hadn't been able to fulfill the conditions of creating a chamber of commerce previously, but now that the ability to do so presented itself, he couldn't miss this opportunity. What if they demand to garrison in the city? Aqua Rose had already spoken with quite a few major powers representatives, so she knew that they aimed to secure a residence in the city for their guilds. Unfortunately, simply joining the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce wouldn't fulfill that wish, in which case, these powers might refuse to join. We'll follow the secret Chamber of Commerce's example then. They will only gain the right to garrison in Stone Forest City if they join the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce as advanced members. Normal members, on the other hand, will enjoy a 20% discount on the city's entry fees, Feng said, chuckling. The more they contribute, the more they will gain. I'm sure they won't have any complaints. Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow's eyes glowed with elation and realization upon hearing Feng's decision. This was undoubtedly a solid solution. If this plan succeeded, Zero Wing's sales channels would reach unprecedented heights. Not even ordinary superpowers would be a match for it. Even without Stone Forest City's profits, the guild would be able to develop smoothly by relying on the income from the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce. Chapter 2169, Gathering of Guilds. Feng's decision inspired Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow, sparking countless ideas as restless excitement filled their hearts. Guild leader, although I think it's a good idea to take advantage of a competition between these guilds for the garrison slots, I'm afraid that some of the smaller guilds will give up altogether knowing that they won't have any chance of winning. Most of the guilds that have approached us with partnership proposals are small guilds, and although they aren't powerful individually, their combined strength is even greater than that of the larger guilds who are interested in an alliance, Aqua Rose said, quickly pointing out the problem with Feng's suggestion. She was far more astute than Feng when it came to management and business. That's right. These smaller guilds don't share the same thought process as their larger counterparts. They aren't considering their future development, prioritizing immediate benefits over all else, Gentle Snow said as she nodded in agreement. We might find it challenging to lure them into the chamber if we only offer a 20% discount. The small guilds don't have many experts, to begin with, and they can only afford to send a small number of players to explore the bottomless abyss. The benefits of joining the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce aren't greater than the cost. They will definitely reject our offer. Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow's reasoning was sound. Although Feng had only suggested the idea a moment ago, both women had already found flaws in his plan. His other subordinates, such as Blackie and Liang Jing, simply couldn't compete with these two. You're both correct. A discount on the city's entry fee won't likely be enough to convince these small guilds, but this city isn't like others. This is Stone Forest City. Even if they wanted to, they'd find the offer difficult to refuse, Feng said, smiling confidently. Listening to his vice guild leader's suggestions, Feng recognized how both had developed their respective guilds into pseudo-super first-rate guilds in the past. To grow stronger, a guild needed more than just powerful experts, it also needed skilled managers with a sharp sense for business. If Feng hadn't relied on philosophies that were beyond the current time and knowledge of God's domain's future, not even he would have been a match for Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow's business sense. Both women gave their guild leader skeptical looks. These guilds want to negotiate a partnership deal, correct? In that case, we'll sit down with them in Stone Forest City's Candlelight trading firm, Feng declared, chuckling. All right. We'll lead them there now, then. Although these women were confused over Feng's decision, they were familiar with his typical antics. Since he had come up with the idea, he must have considered certain factors. Moreover, Stone Forest City was key to Zero Wing's development. As the guild's upper echelons, they had to visit the city and gain a proper understanding of what it had to offer. Disconnecting their call with Feng, the women contacted the various guilds' representatives and informed them that the negotiations would take place in Stone Forest City. What is Zero Wing trying to do? They could negotiate with us directly, but they want us to head to Stone Forest City for the discussion? Isn't this just a waste of time? A level 68 female elementalist in exquisite, light red robes snarled as she watched Aqua Rose in the distance. Over 200 guild representatives occupied the spacious hall, but aside from Unyielding Heart and Mu Lingsha, none of them dared to look this furious woman in the eye. They lowered their heads and avoided her gaze, afraid of attracting her ire. This woman was 16th Cloud, the second vice guild leader of the recently promoted Superpower, Shining Tiger. She had also earned the nickname Flame Empress. She had once been a peerless genius, nurtured by a super guild like the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Phoenix Rain, but she had left the super guild abruptly and joined Shining Tiger, performing many impressive feats for the new Superpower. Although Shining Tiger was not as powerful as Starlink, it ranked near the top among recently promoted superpowers. The guild currently controlled 4 kingdoms and had built a solid foundation in the Glory Empire. Chapter 2171, Sorrowful Silence's Shock. Stone Forest City's mana density didn't only stun the various guild representatives, but Aqua Rose, Gentle Snow, and Zero Wing's main force members were shocked as well. They were no strangers to high mana density environments. In fact, they were accustomed to them. However, the mana in Stone Forest City was even denser than in the Holy City of Titan, and it didn't feel like the usual mana they encountered. This mana had a violent energy, although it didn't make them feel agitated. On the contrary, they felt warm and close to their environment. This closeness gave them a newfound perception of their surroundings. This was a sensation they had never experienced before. It was as if they had just arrived at an entirely new world. Logically, mana shouldn't be able to cause such a sensation, even if it was particularly dense. They had all seen and experienced mana so dense that it appeared as a fog, but it had never made them feel like this. In truth, the sensation Aqua Rose and her party experienced wasn't related to the city's mana in the least. Rather, it was a hidden effect of the Dark Tower. While this sensation felt foreign to Aqua Rose and Zero Wing's members, it wasn't all that odd to 16th Cloud and Sorrowful Silence. These two were particularly familiar with the strange feeling, which horrified them. This close sensation everyone felt was quite similar to the sensation one experienced when they reached the Void Realm. Although what they felt now wasn't as intense as actually reaching the Void Realm, there was roughly a 10% resemblance. Even among the various superpowers, Void Realm experts were treated as upper echelons level individuals. They were a guild's mainstays. And within Stone Forest City, players could actually experience the sensation of being a Void Realm expert. Although the city's atmosphere could only replicate a small fraction of the sensation, it would be a massive help to expert players, particularly Refinement Realm experts. If Refinement Realm experts could examine and experience this sensation, they'd have as much as a 30% chance of reaching the Void Realm in the future. Most of the various large guilds experts would scoff at this 30% chance, but the Superpower's Refinement Realm experts would willingly bankrupt themselves for such a boost. It's no wonder why so many superpowers fought to claim Stone Forest City. I had never dreamed that this city would offer such a benefit. Realization dawned on 16th Cloud as she bathed in the city's mana. Once an expert reached the Refinement Realm, they were almost guaranteed to reach the Flowing Water Realm. Players only needed to be able to observe their enemies' every action and predict their next move to enter the Flowing Water Realm, and normally, players would fulfill these requirements once they had accumulated enough combat experience. To put it simply, one merely needed to work hard to reach the Flowing Water Realm. However, climbing from the Flowing Water Realm into the Void Realm was a different story. This was a qualitative leap. Reaching the Void Realm was akin to switching one's focus from one target to several hundred. The achievement was beyond simply observing one's opponent. Players needed to view situations from a different perspective entirely. Although the various superpowers had plenty of Refinement Realm and Flowing Water Realm experts, very few among these experts were capable of reaching the Void Realm, even within super guilds. The chances of rising from the Flowing Water Realm to the Void Realm was less than 10%. However, if the various superpowers had Stone Forest City's environment, they could certainly nurture a few more peak experts. A single peak expert could command and safeguard an entire section of their guild's territory. With a few more peak experts, superpowers would have an easier time managing their members and territories. Moreover, these peak experts played an important role when acquiring powerful treasure. Monster-level experts were incredibly rare, after all, and most superpowers didn't even have a handful of such experts under their command. In comparison, God's domain had a plethora of precious treasures and dangerous locations to explore. Vice Guild Leader, we must do whatever we can to secure a temporary residence in Stone Forest City. Sorrowful Silence resolutely declared. I know, relax. 16th Cloud nodded, a vibrant light replacing the dull look in her eyes. Now, she couldn't bring herself to look down on Stone Forest City in the slightest. Shining Tiger wasn't like the various super first-rate guilds and super guilds. Since it had only recently established itself, it had poached many of its experts from other guilds. However, poaching peak experts was incredibly difficult since they were integral members of their superpowers. As a result, Shining Tiger had a lot of refinement and flowing water realm experts, but it severely lacked void realm experts. If the guild wanted more void realm experts, it would have to nurture them on its own. Unfortunately, doing so was a major challenge. Despite investing tons of resources, Shining Tiger had only nurtured 2 peak experts thus far. Who knew how long it would take for the guild to nurture more? However, if Shining Tiger could use Stone Forest City's environment, it could ease the burden of nurturing peak experts. The guild could then expand its territory. Even Unyielding Heart's eyes burned with passion. He was overwhelmed with a desire to obtain a temporary residence in Stone Forest City. Unyielding Soul and Starlink had roughly the same number of refinement and flowing water realm experts. Unyielding Soul simply didn't have as many peak and monster level experts as its rival. If Unyielding Soul could resolve that problem, it might become strong enough to continue its competition with Starlink. Furthermore, Stone Forest City was located within the bottomless abyss. With the resources Unyielding Soul could obtain from the regional dungeon, the guild could certainly continue duking it out with Starlink. Before anyone had realized it, the crowd had arrived before the city's Candlelight trading firm. Although Stone Forest City's Candlelight trading firm was no match for the shop in Zero Wing City, it was still a 10-story building that was as large as a sports arena. It could easily accommodate tens of thousands of customers at a time, easily outmatching White River City's Candlelight trading firm. Unfortunately, this shop had yet to open its doors to the public, still in the midst of its renovation. When Stone Forest Town had been upgraded to a basic city, the shop had been promoted as well, and it was in dire need of a reorganization. As the guild representatives entered the shop, they were stunned by the items that were already on display in the first floor hall. Level 60 to level 80, 8-piece dark gold set equipment. How is this possible? Sorrowful Silence cried out when he saw the equipment on display in one of the glass counters. All of the various guild representatives were dumbfounded, their mouths hanging open as they stared at the set equipment in shocked silence. Aside from epic equipment, the best available in the game right now was level 65 dark gold rank, but due to such equipment's rarity, one could count the number of experts in full sets of level 65 dark gold equipment using the fingers on one hand, including those in the various superpowers' main forces. Fully geared in level 65 dark gold equipment, players would have no problems diving into level 70,100-man team dungeons. And yet, a complete level 60 to 80 dark gold set equipment glittered before them. Moreover, it was an 8-piece set. Why wouldn't they be shocked? 8-piece dark gold set equipment was only inferior to epic equipment of the same level. However, that wasn't even the most important aspect. What truly shocked these guild representatives was the set equipment's level. If players could wear this dark gold set equipment by the time they reached level 70, they would breeze through level 70,100-man team dungeons. Moreover, this set equipment was plate armor and wasn't restricted to a specific class. Even an MT could equip this set. If their guilds could get their hands on this set equipment, they'd have a massive advantage over their competition when raiding level-appropriate team dungeons. Chapter 2172, Complete Legacy. The appearance of the crystal light set stupefied everyone present. Some of the guild representatives shuddered slightly upon seeing it. While the various powers were still vying for level 65 dark gold set equipment, Zero Wing had already obtained an entire set of level 60 to level 80, 8-piece dark gold set equipment. With such a frightening advantage, everyone could imagine how much of a lead Zero Wing would have when it came to raiding team dungeons. In fact, before level 80, Zero Wing would be able to steadily secure its position as the overlord of the bottomless abyss. Moreover, this still wasn't the most horrifying part. It might be fine if Zero Wing only had one crystal light set, but there were currently 3 crystal light sets in all on display inside the first floor hall. This meant that Zero Wing could obtain more crystal light sets. The impact of one person equipped in dark gold set equipment and that of an entire team equipped with it were as different as heaven and earth. No matter how powerful an individual player was, there was a limit to how much they could contribute inside a team dungeon. However, if every player in the team was equipped with such equipment, the team's overall performance would skyrocket. After all, the main impediment most powers faced in raiding a team dungeon was their inadequate equipment standards. This was especially true for the various superpowers. So long as the superpowers teams met the required equipment standards, raiding team dungeons would be a piece of cake for them. It's no wonder Zero Wing dares to provoke Starlink. It seems Zero Wing isn't all bark, after all. 16th Cloud's eyes glowed brightly as she looked at the crystal light sets on display. If Shining Tiger could secure a temporary residence in Stone Forest City, in addition to the crystal light set, she believed that it wouldn't be long before Shining Tiger developed into the number 2 power of the Glory Empire, second only to King's Return. After everyone was done admiring the crystal light sets, Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow led the crowd to the shop's top-floor reception room, where Feng had been waiting for quite some time now. Currently, Feng wore a suit of pitch-black armor paired with a dark gray cape. When the various guild representatives saw Feng's figure through the open doors, they found that he gave off a very plain and approachable feeling, without even the slightest tinge of strength. He also did not act haughty the way overlords of kingdoms generally did. However, the instant everyone set foot inside the room, they immediately realized that they were mistaken in their assumptions of Feng, terribly mistaken. Sorrowful Silence even gasped involuntarily when he stepped into the room. Monster. This word simultaneously appeared in everyone's mind. The various guild representatives reacted this way because the moment they stepped into the room, a horrifying pressure had assaulted their bodies. Moreover, this pressure didn't originate just from a difference in basic attributes but also a massive difference in life ratings. At this moment, everyone's gut instincts were blaring their imminent death. It was as if the person sitting before them wasn't a player at all, but a living demon king instead. Didn't they say that Black Flame is only a domain realm expert? How is he so powerful? 16th Cloud's complexion turned indescribably grim as she looked at Feng, who currently sat in the room's seat of honor. She had been nurtured by a super guild, so she had seen many monster-level experts before. Although her current self had yet to reach the domain realm, she was very confident of putting up a fight against an actual domain realm expert. However, when she stood before Feng, she actually felt helpless. When she imagined getting attacked by an expert like Feng out in the fields, her scalp immediately turned numb. Welcome to Stone Forest City. Let me introduce myself. I am Zero Wing's guild leader, Black Flame, Feng said. When he saw the various guild representatives' darkened expressions, particularly 16th Cloud's and Sorrowful Silence's grim expressions, he felt very satisfied with himself. In reality, he wasn't as powerful as everyone thought. Previously, the fact that Unyielding Soul had volunteered to share a portion of its realms of refinement training resources with Zero Wing was already plenty amazing. In fact, Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow had felt ecstatic over the matter. Now, however, Shining Tiger was even more amazing. It was actually offering to provide Zero Wing with a complete refinement realm legacy. In other words, Shining Tiger was willing to give Zero Wing the training data necessary to turn ordinary experts into refinement realm experts. Now, the Zero Wing experts who did not get a chance to experience the Secret Pavilions or Unyielding Souls training system would no longer have to train themselves blindly. They, too, would get to undergo systematic training. With this, their chances of becoming refinement realm experts would increase substantially. Of course, there were many methods for players to reach the refinement realm, some simple and others difficult. However, regardless of the efficiency of the training data Shining Tiger provided, the amount of help the data would provide Zero Wing was something that could not be measured with money. It seems that one of the temporary residence slots is going to end up with Shining Tiger. Sure enough, superpowers really are amazing. How are we supposed to continue competing like this? When the various first-rate guilds' representatives heard the conditions 16th Cloud offered, a little despair sprouted in their hearts. They were fully aware that Stone Forest City had a very limited number of temporary residence slots. Meanwhile, to the current Zero Wing, nothing would be more attractive than a complete refinement realm legacy. In comparison, the shops and treasures their guilds could offer were most likely insignificant in Zero Wing's eyes. Vice Guild Leader Cloud, your offer is indeed very tempting, Feng said. He, too, was very surprised by 16th Cloud's offer. In the next moment, however, he shook his head and added, still, that isn't what Zero Wing wants. What do you want, then? 16th Cloud asked as she stared at Feng incredulously. A complete refinement realm legacy was a priceless treasure to any first-rate guild. Some first-rate guilds would even do everything they could to get their hands on one because only by obtaining a refinement realm legacy would they have the means to become a super first-rate guild. Without it, a first-rate guild had no business talking about becoming a super first-rate guild. Now, however, Zero Wing was actually rejecting this legacy. She simply couldn't figure out what could be more important to Zero Wing than a refinement realm legacy. I don't want much. I just want you to join Zero Wing's newly established Candlelight Chamber of Commerce. Feng replied calmly. Chapter 2173, Candlelight Chamber of Commerce. Join the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce? Upon hearing Feng's words, everyone present stared at him in astonishment, never having thought that the requirement would be so simple. They all knew very clearly what a Chamber of Commerce in the virtual gaming world represented. It was an organization where members shared sales connections with each other for mutual benefit. However, whether one could actually benefit from this method of cooperation would still depend on the members' capabilities. If one sold excellent merchandise, they would naturally be able to make more money. Average merchandise, on the other hand, would soon be overshadowed by the other members' merchandise, resulting in a drastic decrease in one's own sales and profits. A Chamber of Commerce was a double-edged sword. Generally, there were more cons than pros for a small guild to join a Chamber of Commerce. The reason for this was because small guilds lacked resources and invested very little into nurturing lifestyle players. Hence, the quality of merchandise they could offer to customers went without saying. There was simply no way for small guilds to compete with large guilds. For a small guild, joining a Chamber of Commerce was akin to opening the doors for large guilds to earn money in their territory. However, if it meant being able to obtain a temporary residence slot in Stone Forest City, then joining the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce definitely had merit. After all, with sufficient strength, a small guild could not only earn a large amount of rare resources but also nurture its experts in Stone Forest City. Guild Leader Black Flame, are you saying that, so long as we join the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce, we'll receive a temporary residence in Stone Forest City? 16th Cloud pressed Feng for confirmation. She wasn't particularly surprised that Zero Wing would attempt to establish a Chamber of Commerce. After all, there were so many guilds currently seeking a partnership with Zero Wing. If Zero Wing could pool the strength of these guilds together, then even superpowers would grow fearful. If Zero Wing wished to continue competing with Starlink, then establishing a Chamber of Commerce was, indeed, the best decision to make. A complete refinement realm legacy might allow a guild to nurture many refinement realm experts, but accomplishing this required a lot of time, which just so happened to be the resource that up-and-coming guilds like Zero Wing lacked the most. Hence, rather than aim for an uncertain future, it was much better for Zero Wing to further enhance its current strength. That's not entirely correct, Feng said, shaking his head. To be precise, only advanced members of the chamber will receive a temporary residence slot in Stone Forest City. As for how you can become an advanced member, that will depend on the amount of contributions you make. So, that's the case. Realization immediately dawned upon 16th Cloud. Inwardly, she cursed at Feng for being a sly old fox. Originally, only a few guilds should be able to partner with Zero Wing. Now, however, every guild present would do so. Moreover, these guilds would all desperately contest for the limited temporary residence slots, which would allow Zero Wing to obtain the maximum amount of benefits possible. Meanwhile, when the various guild representatives heard Feng's condition, they understood the implications right away. Zero Wing was trying to have them compete for the limited temporary residence slots and labor for it, indirectly making them Zero Wing's subordinates. Guild leader Black Flame, I'm afraid this arrangement is very unfair for small guilds like us. Compared to the strength and resources large guilds possess, what small guilds have is insignificant. In the end, these residence slots will still land in the hands of large guilds. If that's the case, small guilds like ours might as well give up on competing right off the bat since we already know we won't win. Moreover, we will even end up working for Zero Wing for free. That's right. Small guilds like ours can't compete against large guilds at all. With your arrangement, how are we even supposed to compete? We might as well head back home now. For a while, a few representatives of small guilds stepped forward and voiced their disagreement. These representatives even tried to get the representatives of other small guilds to leave the venue with them. Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow frowned upon seeing this scene. Although they had expected that these small guilds would react this way, they hadn't anticipated such an organized refusal. As for the representatives of large guilds, they were gleefully watching this scene play out. After all, the fewer competitors they had, the better. In fact, they hoped that every other guild present would stand up and quit the venue. Zero Wing's ambitions are quite large. Unfortunately, it lacks the ability to control these small guilds, Sorrowful Silence commented as he watched the representatives of small guilds prepare to leave the room en masse. At the end of the day, Zero Wing's foundations are still too shallow. If it were a superpower making this offer, these small guilds would have most likely agreed without hesitation. At this moment, aside from Sorrowful Silence, Unyielding Heart also felt this way. Zero Wing simply had too few territories under its control right now. The number of territories and sales connections it possessed couldn't even compete with that of veteran first-rate guilds. A weak chamber of commerce like Candlelight just didn't hold any attraction for the various small guilds. On the contrary, membership in the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce would let Zero Wing bleed them dry. However, just when the representatives of the various small guilds were about to leave the room, a calm voice penetrated everyone's minds. What you're saying is correct, but let me say this first. So long as you become a member of the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce, you'll enjoy a 20% discount on Stone Forest City's entry fee. Moreover, you'll get to purchase items that the Candlelight trading firm does not sell to the public, Feng said, smiling calmly as he looked at the small guild's representatives. As soon as Feng was done speaking, the departing representatives fell into a daze, their breathing becoming slightly heavy. Items not sold to the public? Does this include the crystal light set displayed on the first floor? A small guild's representative could not help asking Feng. The discount on Stone Forest City's entry fee might be very tempting, but a 20% discount was basically negligible to the various powers. However, Candlelight's merchandise was a different story. After all, they had seen the 3 crystal light sets displayed in the first floor hall. Those could tempt even superpowers into action. That's right. Including the crystal light set, Feng affirmed, nodding. The moment he nodded his head, the entire reception room fell deathly silent. Even 16th Cloud and Sorrowful Silence, who were originally planning to watch Zero Wing make a fool of itself, reflexively widened their eyes as they stared at its guild leader. That was level 60 to level 80, 8-piece dark gold set equipment they were talking about. They had believed that Zero Wing was merely flaunting its strength before the various guilds present by putting the crystal light set on display. Now, however, Feng was telling them that they could actually buy those crystal light sets. How could this not excite them? As for the various small guilds' representatives, their minds momentarily froze. They simply could not understand what Feng was thinking, to be willing to sell such precious set equipment. However, after a moment of silence, everyone inside the room stopped wondering why Feng pulled such an insane move. Instead, the various small guilds' representatives promptly returned to their seats and expressed their willingness to join the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce, afraid that he would regret his decision if they waited any longer. The various small guilds present eagerly applied to join the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce, their eagerness surpassing even that of the large guilds present. Zero Wing is really ruthless, actually offering to give away set equipment like the Crystal Light set just to attract these small guilds. Sorrowful Silence marveled at Feng's generosity. In Zero Wing's shoes, Shining Tiger would never choose to sell the Crystal Light set to others. No pain, no gain. While it might seem as if Zero Wing gave up a huge advantage by selling the Crystal Light set, Zero Wing obtained the strength and sales connections of more than 100 guilds in return, 16th Cloud said when she saw the eagerness of the guild representatives around her. Meanwhile, now that Zero Wing has gained such strength and connections, the various superpowers will have to think twice before targeting Zero Wing in the future. At this point, 16th Cloud could already foresee the appearance of another powerhouse in God's domain. Chapter 2174, Frightening Stone Forest City. Within the magnificent reception room, Feng began to sign contracts with the various guild representatives. Any guild that joined the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce would qualify to participate in the auction for the Crystal Light sets, which would take place once every 3 days. Candlelight would offer 3 to 5 sets in each auction session, and the guilds would only be allowed to win a single bid. In addition, the Candlelight trading firm would offer other precious items, such as exotic stamina potions, stamina gemstones, advanced mana armor kits, rare master potions, and more. Each member of the chamber could even earn the rights to purchase miniature ballistas, depending on their contributions to the chamber. With this revelation, every guild representative was ecstatic, especially those from the various small guilds. At this point, obtaining a temporary residence in Stone Forest City didn't matter much compared to the items Zero Wing was willing to sell. After 3 short hours, the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce had nearly 200 members, and Zero Wing had secured a massive alliance. Among these guilds, Shining Tiger and Unyielding Soul had instantly become advanced members. Both guilds had presented an offer that Feng couldn't refuse. Not only had Shining Tiger offered to open 2 kingdoms markets to the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce, but it had also agreed to give Zero Wing the complete Refinement Realm legacy and a large stock of special materials. In addition, Shining Tiger had promised to fight alongside Zero Wing to protect Stone Forest City. Although Unyielding Soul had only given the chamber access to a single kingdom's market and a portion of the Dark Knight Empires, it had offered to provide some of the training data it had gained from its flowing water realm experts. Furthermore, it had agreed to supply training facilities and energy resources, in addition to 10 unlimited training slots for Refinement Realm experts in its training system, which would allow these players to earn the experience necessary to reach the flowing water realm quickly. The unlimited training slots Unyielding Soul had offered weren't like those from the Secret Pavilion. Zero Wing's members would be free to fight any Refinement Realm or Flowing Water Realm expert they desired, and they could do so without limit. On the other hand, Zero Wing's members had to earn points in the Secret Pavilion's training system, which they would have to spend to train against their desired experts. Of course, the Secret Pavilion had chosen this approach because of the high cost of doing otherwise. Not only was high-level energy extremely rare, but it was also quite versatile, useful in many aspects. As a result, it was strictly regulated. Even international corporations could only acquire limited amounts of high-level energy, and simulating expert players required a lot of it. The more powerful an expert was, the more energy a system would need to mimic them. Even the Secret Pavilion could only afford for a select few talented members to use the system. If Unyielding Soul hadn't been so desperate to secure a temporary residence in Stone Forest City, it would never have offered 10 unlimited training slots to Zero Wing. Of course, Unyielding Soul could only afford this offer because Zero Wing had too few experts that could actually use their training slots, especially when challenging Flowing Water and Void Realm experts. Zero Wing wasn't even a match for ordinary superpowers in this regard. Although Shi Feng knew that unyielding soul was taking advantage of him, he didn't mind. Many of Zero Wing's experts, including Aqua Rose, Gentle Snow, Fire Dance, Violet Cloud, Shadow Sword, Flying Shadow, Alluring Summer, and Cola, were stuck in the refinement realm. However, their failure to progress wasn't due to a lack of talent, but a lack of combat experience. They weren't like Shi Feng, who had accumulated an abundance of combat experience in God's domain. If Shi Feng hadn't retained his memories from his previous life, he would never have been able to jump from the refinement realm to the flowing water realm so smoothly. Shi Feng used the money Stone Forest City had earned so far to construct shops, hotels, restaurants, bars, smithies, and private housing within the city. Recruiting NPC soldiers wasn't an issue either, and he was able to gear them all in sets of fine gold equipment. Now, even a random Tier 2 NPC soldier in the city could slay a Tier 2 expert. Even peak experts would have to think twice before committing a crime in Stone Forest City. Shi Feng didn't bother to gear his NPCs in dark gold equipment due to the whopping 1,500 gold cost. Now that they've established such a powerful chamber of commerce, the others won't be able to remain idle. Moreover, Starlink won't stand for this. This matter will certainly affect Starlink's development in the Dark Knight Empire, Nine Dragons Emperor said, sneering. Starlink has always been so arrogant and unwilling to negotiate an alliance. Marshal, quietly visit Dark Knight City and negotiate our terms with Lu Xinglua. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I'm sure Starlink will fund us now. Starlink was well known for its wealth in God's domain. At the moment, Nine Dragons Emperor's chances of defeating Phoenix Rain were only 40%, but if he had Starlink's help, he was certain his chances of becoming the next great Pavilion Master would double. You're truly awe-inspiring, Pavilion Master. With this, we'll be able to turn the tables. If Phoenix Rain and Black Flame knew what we were planning, they'd likely go mad, Marshal Dragon said, smiling. I'll head to Dark Knight City right away. Following which, Marshal Dragon left the office and made his way toward Dark Knight City. Meanwhile, Shi Feng had finally completed his tasks in Stone Forest City. All he needed to do now was to leave the city in Melancholic Smile's hands and wait for the influx of players. He didn't remain idle after dealing with the city's construction. He made his way to one of the Candlelight trading firm's forging rooms and started to forge crystal light sets and advanced mana armor kits. Zero Wing and the various guilds needed both the crystal light sets and advanced mana armor kits desperately, but the set equipment was too difficult to mass produce. Only Shi Feng was able to forge the sets at a reliable cost. If he tasked Cream Cocoa and the other basic master forgers to produce the set, he wouldn't even recoup his production costs, much less make a profit. Shi Feng spent more than 4 days in the forging room and forged 26 crystal light sets and over 1,300 advanced mana armor kits. Not only had he earned a ton of forging proficiency during the past few days, but he had also gained enough EXP to hit level 77. Meanwhile, Stone Forest City's player population had skyrocketed, crossing the 3 million threshold already. After deducting the city's operational costs, Zero Wing had made over 100,000 gold in pure profit from Stone Forest City alone. Stone Forest City's income surpassed that of Zero Wing City and Silverwing Town by multiple times. Not only could Zero Wing afford to pay off all of its debt, but it could also set aside a fortune in savings. However, what had Shi Feng truly ecstatic was the leveling speed of his guild's core members. Maybe it was because the Bottomless Abyss was a God mode regional dungeon, but over the past 4 days, most of Zero Wing's core members had reached level 68. Some had even risen to level 70. Even Superpower's peak experts were just reaching this level by now. The core members' combat standards had rapidly improved as well, thanks to the complete refinement realm legacy Shining Tiger had provided. Although Fierce Snake was the only one of them to reach the refinement realm thus far, more than a dozen core members had reached the half-step refinement realm. Their development speed was simply marvelous. While Shi Feng instructed Zero Wing's internal members in the guild's real-world headquarters, Liang Jing approached him with an anxious expression. Head Instructor Sure, the Big Dipper Dojo has contacted us to inform us that it will cease all cooperation with our workshop and will no longer supply talented recruits. It has also instructed its members to leave Zero Wing. Chapter 2176, Meeting. They're ending our cooperation? The news blindsided Sure Feng. What happened? Are you sure you're not mistaken? Although Zero Wing had grown quite strong and countless players applied to join the guild each day, it still had very few internal members. It took a long time to research all of the applicants' backgrounds through God's domain, and no one could tell whether or not an applicant was a spy from another guild. Most players in God's domain also had jobs in the real world. They couldn't fully devote themselves to the game and treated it as a way to earn some additional income. This was why Zero Wing lacked internal members, despite how many experts joined the guild in God's domain. Now that Zero Wing had nearly 1 million members in God's domain, it needed enough internal members to manage these players. Hence, the guild had been doing its best to recruit internal members. Zero Wing had two main sources for internal members, the Big Dipper Dojo, and Zero Wing's other main headquarters. Among the two, the Big Dipper Dojo was the most important. God's Domain was a virtual reality game that mimicked reality to a frightening degree. The state of one's body in the real world would affect their body in God's Domain to a certain extent. Most of the Big Dipper Dojo's members had excellent physical fitness, and since they were already used to combat, they had a natural advantage in God's Domain. In contrast, the internal members recruited through the main headquarters weren't as high quality. Most of these internal members had to be trained from scratch. They needed far more time to become combat ready in the game, something which Zero Wing didn't have much of. However, not only had the Big Dipper Dojo informed Zero Wing that it would no longer cooperate with the workshop, but it was also withdrawing its members. This would severely hamper the guild's operations. Many of Zero Wing's managers were Big Dipper Dojo members. Sure Feng couldn't understand what would have prompted this sudden change of heart. His relationship with the Big Dipper group had always been good. In fact, they were mutually beneficial partners, with the dojo providing talented fighters and Zero Wing training the dojo's members. No matter how Sure Feng thought about it, the Big Dipper group had no reason to dismiss their partnership. I have confirmed the news already. The Big Dipper Group's board of directors made this decision themselves. Not even Chairman Xiao has the power to change it, Liang Jing said with a grim expression. Moreover, the Big Dipper Dojo isn't the only one. The several other dojos and training centers in the city that we had been negotiating with have declined any partnership as well. The others have abandoned us, too? Sure Feng was astonished. Because of Zero Wing's rapid development, the guild urgently needed internal members for its management. Relying on the Big Dipper Dojo's members simply wasn't enough. Hence, Sure Feng had instructed Liang Jing to negotiate with the city's other dojos and training centers. Now, however, not only had the Big Dipper Dojo abandoned Zero Wing, but the other dojos and training centers had as well. No matter how he looked at it, this couldn't be normal. Chairman Xiao recently contacted me, informing me that he has some important matters to discuss. He hopes that you will take some time to listen to what he has to say, Liang Jing reported awkwardly. After giving the matter some thought, she asked hesitantly, should I reject him? It's fine. I want to meet with Chairman Xiao. Sure Feng understood why Liang Jing felt so awkward. Her prior home had just betrayed Zero Wing, and anyone in her position would feel uncomfortable. It wouldn't even be strange if he suspected that she had been untrustworthy. However, throughout his time working with Liang Jing, Sure Feng knew that she was more than just a capable manager, she was also consistently professional. Even Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow trusted her enough to give her important work. I'll make the arrangements right away, Liang Jing replied. When she realized that Sure Feng didn't treat her any differently than he normally did, she mentally released a held breath. She then contacted Xiao Yu to notify him of Sure Feng's decision. Liang Jing and Xiao Yu quickly decided on the time and place for their meeting. They would discuss matters in the Redstone restaurant, the most luxurious eatery in the city. Feng was a little surprised to hear that he'd sit down with Chairman Xiao there. Although he wasn't particularly familiar with Fenglin City, the first-tier city that housed Zero Wing's main headquarters, he had heard of Redstone Restaurant. Rumors had it that the restaurant had a powerful background. Not only was its food incredibly delicious, but it also provided more for the human body than A-rank nutrient fluid. Of course, the food was also more expensive than A-rank nutrient fluid. Even so, countless professional fighters dreamed of dining in the Redstone restaurant. Naturally, Feng had wanted to visit the restaurant in his previous life as well, but unfortunately, Redstone didn't cater to outsiders. Simply being able to afford the meals wasn't enough. Individuals would only be allowed to dine in its halls after becoming a member. Shadow had become a titan in Jinhai City in the past, holding a frightening amount of assets. It had far surpassed the current Big Dipper group. Even so, Shadow had never become a member of the Redstone restaurant. Yet now, Xiao Yu had invited Feng to meet there. Feng arrived with Liang Jing at his side at 6 p.m. Contrary to most assumptions, the Redstone restaurant wasn't particularly large, only 9 stories. It also wasn't in the city's business district, but in the outer district. The interior, however, had an antique flair and impressive elegance. As he stepped inside, Feng felt as if he had entered paradise as an indescribable pleasant feeling washed over him. "Hello, sir. May I know the room number of your reservation?" a tall beauty in a blue dress asked, smiling as she approached Feng and Liang Jing. Although this woman was only a receptionist, Feng could tell with a glance that she was excellently fit and likely a skilled martial artist. The woman's movements were simple, without any excess motion as she approached. It was no exaggeration to claim that an ordinary, provincial-level professional fighter would be a match for this receptionist. In the Big Dipper dojo, she would have been one of the best fighters and lavished with attention during her training. Yet, this woman was only a receptionist in the Redstone restaurant. "Room 908, Feng answered after recovering from his moment of surprise. "Room 908? Please, follow me," the female receptionist answered, astonishment flashing in her eyes when she heard Feng's answer. She immediately adopted a more respectful attitude toward Feng. A short moment later, Feng arrived in a large, lavish room. He felt a gaze lock onto him the moment he stepped through the doorway as a powerful aura washed over him. However, this aura felt nothing like that of a professional fighter. Rather, it felt like that of an assassin with immense experience in life-or-death combat. What a powerful person. When Feng had reached the domain realm, his mental abilities had reached new heights as well. His 5 senses had sharpened beyond an ordinary person's, so he was able to identify the source of the piercing gaze and powerful aura. The man was thin, middle-aged, and wearing a black suit. He didn't look anything like a professional fighter or martial artist. He looked more like a butler as he currently stood next to an indifferent youth. Xiao Yu sat across from the youth with a nervous expression. Feng faintly noticed a few droplets of sweat crawling down his forehead. At the moment, the man looked like a greenhorn in the industry, not the veteran businessman he truly was. Head instructor you finally arrived. When Xiao Yu saw Feng entering the room, he felt as if he had been granted amnesty, and he stood and quickly welcomed Feng. Instead of bothering with idle chit-chat, Feng shifted his gaze to the youth and asked, "And this is?" "Let me introduce you. This is young Master Feng, the 5 States Corporation's successor," Xiao Yu said solemnly. "Head instructor to be honest, I invited you here at young Master Han's request." When she heard the introduction, Liang Jing turned to stare at the indifferent youth from behind Feng. The 5 States Corporation was one of the most powerful companies in the country. It dabbled in a variety of industries, including energy, combat, food, and entertainment. Chapter 2177, Clash in Reality. The moment Feng finished his question, the temperature in the room seemed to plummet. Even Xiao Yu, who had fought in business for so many years, stared at Feng in horror. "It's over. Everything's over now," Xiaoyu felt as if the sky were crumbling down around him. Through Liang Jing, he had learned about some of Zero Wing's accomplishments. He knew that Zero Wing had ties with a few major corporations and that it had even met with these corporations' upper echelons. Zero Wing had been doing quite well in God's Domain, a virtual reality game that had become incredibly popular. However, after all was said and done, Zero Wing was only powerful within the virtual reality game. On the other hand, the Five States Corporation was one of the most powerful corporations in the country, wielding unimaginable authority and status. As the chairman's only son, no one in the country's higher social circles could afford to offend Feng. Countless companies and corporations would do anything to get into the boy's good graces. Feng, however, had rejected Feng's offer without hesitation. He hadn't held back in the least. If Feng angered this youth, not even the major corporations that had invested in Zero Wing would escape Feng's wrath, not to mention Zero Wing itself. After the silence stretched for a moment, the youth finally opened his mouth to break it. Very good. As expected of the person that has made Lu Xinglua so miserable. Contrary to Xiao Yu's expectations, Feng hadn't reacted in rage or disdain. The youth remained strangely calm as if this matter had nothing to do with him. Since that is the case, let's forget about this matter altogether. However, I have to warn you that the Starline Corporation isn't an easy foe. Lu Xinglua has already begun to use his connections against your guild. I'm sure you've noticed, but this is only the beginning. God's Domain is involved in far more than you could possibly imagine, and Zero Wing has begun to touch upon too many people's interests. Without sufficient backing, you'd best be careful. Following which, Feng glanced at the thin man beside him. The thin man then promptly revealed a card and handed it to Feng. This is my card. If a day comes when you change your mind, you can contact me, Feng said, his voice just as void of emotion as it had been during their introduction. Xiao Yu was surprised to see Feng offer Feng his card. He had never realized that the youth viewed Zero Wing so highly as to offer his card. To ordinary people, offering one's card had very little meaning, but for those of Feng's status, it was a sign of recognition. It meant that the receiver was allowed to contact the giver directly. Feng's status was on par with a dynasty's imperial prince. Even Xiao Yu, a company's chairman, didn't qualify to reach out to this youth. If Xiao Yu wished to speak with Feng, he'd have to make an appointment with his secretary. Moreover, whether or not Feng agreed to meet with him was an entirely different story. Feng accepted Feng's card graciously. Even if they couldn't reach an agreement, a friendship was possible. Moreover, holding a person like Feng's card was the equivalent of securing a major customer. If Zero Wing had something valuable enough to sell in the future, it could do so with this contact. Moreover, Feng could tell that Feng wasn't like the usual wealthy young masters. He certainly wasn't anything like Lu Xinglua. The youth felt inhuman. Throughout their discussion, Feng had remained absolutely calm and was in better physical shape than Feng had ever seen. Even if he hadn't been the heir to the Five States Corporation, he would have had an extraordinary future. If he wanted to become a professional fighter, he'd easily make it to the international level. Not even an internal force expert like Lei Bao would be a match for Feng. If Feng continued to grow stronger, he could even claim the world championship. Following which, Feng and Feng chatted about the situation in God's Domain. Feng then left the Redstone restaurant with Liang Jing and Xiao Yu. Once the trio left, only Feng and his middle-aged escort lingered in the room. Young master, aren't you a little disappointed that Zero Wing refused to sell? If we pull a few strings, taking the guild wouldn't be difficult, the middle-aged man asked softly. Zero Wing's foundations are impressive, but it faces too many challenges at the moment. If we try to take it by force or push the issue of purchasing it, Zero Wing will unravel. That wouldn't be beneficial to our entry into God's Domain, Feng said, shaking his head. Moreover, Zero Wing isn't the only available option. Although Zero Wing has more of an advantage, the others have far fewer problems. Overall, they are a better match for our needs than Zero Wing. If that is the case, why did you request to meet Zero Wing's representative, young master? The middle-aged man asked. I wanted to see its behavior and circumstances. I want to confirm whether or not Zero Wing can truly cause Starling trouble, Feng said. Young master, is there a need to concern yourself with a minor existence like Lu Xinglua? The middle-aged man asked. You don't understand. If it were only Lu Xinglua, Starlink wouldn't be a problem, but those behind him aren't easy to remove. I only hope that Zero Wing can buy me some more time. If it proves up to the task, I'll have enough time to prepare, Feng explained, glancing at the man. Realization dawned on the butler. However, in the middle-aged man's opinion, Zero Wing will have more trouble making waves now that Lu Xinglua had used some of his connections. Since he had some understanding of management, he also knew that if Zero Wing didn't have enough trustworthy internal members to operate the guild, it would fall into ruin in the long run. Furthermore, Lu Xinglua had only begun to use his connections, yet Zero Wing was already in such great danger. The guild had no hope of surviving very long. Meanwhile, Xiao Yu had remained silent until the trio had moved into a limousine and left the Redstone restaurant. Turning to Feng, he asked, Head Instructor Shi, this is a rare opportunity. How could you reject his offer? The Five States Corporation's influence is extensive. Even the slightest of relationships with the corporation could help a company's value skyrocket. If the Zero Wing Workshop became a subordinate company, it could operate unhindered even in a first-tier city like Fenglin City. Even Starlink would struggle to take down Zero Wing. The Big Dipper Group dreamed of establishing in a first-tier city like Fenglin City, but it didn't even dare to imagine the freedom of moving without hindrance. Yet, Feng had declined such a golden opportunity. Moreover, Zero Wing's current position wasn't particularly optimistic. Due to Lu Xinglua's interference, no company or corporation had any interest in working with the guild. If this persisted, how would the workshop solidify its position in Fenglin City? Even Liang Jing began to worry as she sat quietly next to Feng. She hadn't known the full story. Now that she knew that the Starline Corporation was responsible for the Big Dipper Group's abandonment, she understood the severity of the situation. Zero Wing truly stood on a precipice. Their current opponent fought in the real world, not in the game, and the power capital held in reality was no trivial matter. The Five States Corporation might be incredibly powerful, but Zero Wing isn't completely helpless without it. The Starline Corporation can't just push my guild around, Feng calmly replied. Lu Xinglua wants to prevent us from allying with any training centers or dojos. In that case, we'll open a training center of our own. Chapter 2178, Insane Feng. Open one of your own? Xiao Yu was a little taken aback and saw Feng's idea as a little too immature. Head Instructor Shi, without exaggerating, opening a training center in Fenglin City would be extremely challenging. Not even the White Clan group is powerful enough to succeed. Establishing its own training center was a good idea for Zero Wing. At the very least, the workshop wouldn't need to rely on others. However, opening up a training center in this day and age was not an easy task. First, in this era of physical fitness, countless people had tried to capitalize on humanity's focus in this aspect and open training centers and dojos, and as a result, competition was fierce. Second, starting a new business required a massive amount of capital. Even ignoring venue costs, the latest training equipment cost a fortune. The state-of-the-art facilities were a minimum requirement for any training center or dojo in a first-tier city like Fenglin, but to attract more consumers, one would need nutrition and medical facilities. Without these basic amenities, nobody would join. The only reason the Big Dipper Group had earned its current status and fame in Jinhai City was its decision to follow the evolving trends early in its decades-long history. Just to open a training center or dojo in Jinhai City required a powerful corporation's full financial support naturally. One would need far more capital to open one in a first-tier city like Fenglin. Even the current Big Dipper Group would struggle to succeed. This was why the Big Dipper Group hadn't opened a branch in a first-tier city. Xiao Yu couldn't even imagine where Feng would find the money necessary to open a training center here. He knew quite a bit about Zero Wing, and although it had the support of the White Clan group, which was slightly more generous than that from the Big Dipper group, White Clan was already struggling to support Zero Wing's headquarters. How could it possibly afford to establish a training center in Fenglin City? Furthermore, the Starline Corporation had set its sights on the workshop. No financial group or corporation would dare to ally itself with or lend money to Zero Wing. Then, would you be interested in investing in Zero Wing, Chairman Xiao? Feng asked, chuckling. He did not try to rebuke Xiao Yu's claim, quietly observing the man, instead. Feng was fully aware of how difficult it would be to open a training center. Aside from his inexperience in managing a training center, the required capital was indeed a massive issue. He had already spent all of the funding Phoenix Rain had invested in Zero Wing to secure Ouroboros's old training ground, although Phoenix Rain hadn't supplied her full investment yet. The funding she had given him was a deposit, which Zero Wing would slowly pay back through a portion of the rent from Stone Forest City's shops and virtual stores. If Zero Wing lost Stone Forest City, the guild would have to return the remaining funds. Xiao Yu, on the other hand, had years of experience with running a training center. If Feng could enlist Xiao Yu's help, establishing a training center for Zero Wing would become much easier. You sure know how to ask, Xiao Yu replied after a moment of silence, smiling bitterly as he examined Feng's serious expression. I have dreamed for many years of opening a training center in a first-tier city like Fenglin, but the Big Dipper group isn't capable of doing so. The board of directors will never agree to a partnership. They won't even agree to lend you a single cent. I'll think of something to resolve the financial issue. What I'm asking right now is whether or not you, as an individual, are interested in becoming a partner with Zero Wing, Feng clarified. He recognized Xiao Yu's concerns. Even though Xiao Yu was Big Dipper's chairman, the board of directors had the final say in all matters. Unfortunately, who would dare side with Zero Wing while the Starline Corporation targeted the organization? If you are willing to become a partner, I'm willing to offer you 5% of the training center's shares. Feng valued Xiao Yu far more than the Big Dipper group as a whole. Not only did Xiao Yu have a wealth of experience with managing training centers, but he also had connections throughout the industry, far more than an outsider like Feng. Not even Gentle Snow was a match for the man before him. The White Clan group, after all, dabbled in a variety of industries. Xiao Yu had to admit that he found Feng's offer a little tempting. He had always wanted to manage a training center in a first-tier city, but doing so was a larger challenge than he could afford. Not only would he need enough funding, but he'd also need sufficient strength. Meanwhile, Feng was even more skilled as an internal force expert than Lei Bao. Even in a first-tier city brimming with experts, he was a force to behold. Feng's only flaw was his lack of fame, but that could easily be resolved with enough money. How large of a training center are you preparing to open? Xiao Yu asked. A training center's size was particularly important. Small training centers, with only 1 or 2 floors, had no place in first-tier cities. Such minuscule facilities wouldn't even be large enough for state-of-the-art training equipment, much less nutrition and medical facilities. But if Feng could secure a 5- or 6-story building within the city center for his training center, he might just have a chance of survival. Unfortunately, he'd need to own the building, not rent it. With Starline Corporation's harassment, it could easily force the building's owner to dissolve the lease halfway through. I'm thinking about one of the skyscrapers in the city center, Feng replied after giving the matter some thought. If he were to establish a training center under Zero Wing's name, a small building wouldn't do. It wouldn't even be enough for Zero Wing's uses. During his previous life, even second-rate guilds like Shadow had the full support of multiple training centers and dojos, and only with that support had Shadow filled its management positions with trustworthy experts, ensuring the guild's normal operations could continue. If he didn't secure a training center that was on a similar scale to the Big Dipper training center, Zero Wing could stagnate. An entire skyscraper? Xiao Yu could not help but roll his eyes. Fenglin City was a first-tier city, and its land cost far more than in Jinhai City. Even if the Big Dipper Group invested everything it could, it would, at most, secure an 8 or 9-story building in the city center. Meanwhile, most skyscrapers in Fenglin City had more than 40 floors. Is it not enough? Feng asked as he gave Xiao Yu a curious look. If you can purchase a skyscraper, then I wouldn't mind partnering with you, Xiao Yu decided. He felt that Feng had played God's domain too much and gone mad. He had held on to a thread of hope at the thought of managing a training center in a first-tier city, but now, Feng's madness had dashed that hope. Securing a skyscraper in Fenglin City's city center was easier said than done. Did Feng really think it was some cabbage, easy to buy and widely available? Satisfied with Xiao Yu's agreement, Feng returned to Zero Wing's main headquarters and logged back into God's domain. The Candlelight trading firm's lifestyle players relied on their shares of the revenue to earn a living, exchanging coins for credits. Starlink's offer of a stable salary was sorely tempting. As players continued to level up, coins would become more attainable, and as a result, their value would depreciate. However, if one were paid in credits, they wouldn't have to worry about losing income as coins became less valuable. It was only natural that Starlink's offer would attract lifestyle players. Starlink is using its capital now? Feng could not help but chuckle. The concept of paying lifestyle players with credits wasn't foreign to Feng. On the contrary, he was very familiar with the idea. When players had reached level 80 during his previous life, the various superpowers had gradually realized how important lifestyle players truly were. As a result, they had begun to use this method to poach capable lifestyle players, and in the end, even the various major powers had to resort to such a tactic. Many of the poorer powers had been thrown back to the Stone Age, with some crumbling as a result. Guild leader, if we don't take any countermeasures, I'm afraid that we'll lose even more people, Melancholic Smile said worriedly. However, if we use the same tactic, will we have enough credits to support the Candlelight trading firm with how much our guild is earning right now? If we sell our coins, we'll play right into Starlink's hands. It was at this moment that Melancholic Smile realized how truly terrifying a superpower could be. It was actually possible to kill someone with money alone. I'm not sure who gave Starlink this idea, but it should prepare to lose a few teeth if it thinks it can use capital to compete with Zero Wing. Feng declared with a smile. If this had happened before Feng had upgraded Stone Forest Town into Stone Forest City, Zero Wing would have likely suffered, but it was no longer the guild it had been. The various superpowers simply did not realize what Stone Forest City represented. How are the private houses around the battle arena coming along? Feng asked. We finished 70% of them. The remaining 30% will require another 2 or 3 days, Melancholic Smile replied. Although she didn't know why Feng asked, she quickly sent him a report on the construction process. Zero Wing had spent over 160,000 gold over the past few days to build these private houses, and it was, undoubtedly, the largest investment the guild had made thus far. We have 70% complete? Feng nodded in satisfaction as he inspected the report. Over 7,000 houses should be enough. Publish an announcement that Stone Forest City is renting its private houses to the public. We'll hold an auction for them throughout the Candlelight trading firm's branches simultaneously. We'll only accept credits as payment, and we'll start the bid at 30,000 credits per month. 30,000 credits for 1 month? Isn't that a little too expensive? Feng's price shocked Melancholic Smile. Private houses weren't like shops, which could generate profit for players. Renting a private house was akin to buying a consumable item. They'd be fortunate enough to find players that were willing to rent a private house for a few thousand credits. 30,000 credits per month was just absurd. Relax. Just have someone spread the news. The sooner we get this done, the better, Feng said, chuckling. He did not offer any further explanation. Cities within the bottomless abyss had been holy sites for players in the past. Countless expert players had dreamed of owning private houses in these cities. Unfortunately, the ruling powers had only leased these private houses, but even so, experts had fought desperately to acquire one for themselves. At one time, renting these holy cities' private houses had cost more than 50,000 credits per month. That situation had enlightened God's Domain's players just how much money one could make in the game. Compared to the past, 30,000 credits was quite cheap. Melancholic Smile followed her orders and posted the announcement on the official forums in God's Domain's various kingdoms and empires. Chapter 2180, Crazy Auction. The moment God's Domain's players heard that Stone Forest City's private houses would be available to rent, the news caused a sensation throughout the various kingdoms and empires. I'm not seeing things, right? Zero Wing is actually leasing its private houses to the public? This is wonderful. If we can rent a private house in Stone Forest City, we can teleport there anytime we want. Crap. Zero Wing is so scummy. It's only leasing the private houses, not selling them. Almost every player in the game paid close attention to Stone Forest City since they all had optimistic hopes for the bottomless abyss, especially now that players had begun to explore the regional dungeon, spreading the news of their harvests. Many independent players had found fine gold treasure chests, and independent teams had obtained advanced legacies after killing Grand Lords. Even the weakest boss in the bottomless abyss dropped level 65 secret silver equipment, and that was when their luck had failed them. If players' luck held out, even level 65 fine gold weapons and equipment dropped from the weaker bosses. However, the various kingdoms and empires players were focused on something else entirely. Players' leveling speed in the regional dungeon excited them far more than its frightening drop rates. Everyone had been impressed with their leveling speed in neutral maps, but they could level twice as fast in the bottomless abyss. Because of this, the bottomless abyss had become a sacred leveling ground. Unfortunately, it wasn't easy to reach the dungeon's first floor. Even ordinary expert teams suffered annihilation before they got that far. However, the announcement regarding Stone Forest City's private houses alleviated this problem. With a private house, players could teleport to the bottomless abyss at any time, from anywhere. They could also teleport to their private houses from within the regional dungeons. It would save them plenty of travel time, and they could explore farther than before. However, when the public discovered Zero Wing's intentions to auction off the private houses and the starting bid, they burst into heated discussions. Not only is Zero Wing refusing to sell the private houses, only rent them, but its starting bid is 30,000 credits per month? Is Zero Wing insane? Zero Wing is too greedy. I don't even make 10,000 credits per month. You'd have to be wealthy to afford these houses. That's right. Who would want to rent those private houses at such a high price? Countless players cursed Zero Wing for its fraudulence when they saw the minimum bid. The guild had essentially excluded ordinary players from the auction with such a high price. Only wealthy players would be able to afford to grind freely in the bottomless abyss. Meanwhile, several flashes illuminated Dark Knight City's teleportation hall as a 6-man party arrived. These 6 players were not particularly high-leveled, with most of them around level 56 or 57. The party's highest-level player was only level 60. However, she wore a full set of level 60 fine gold equipment and carried 2 longswords of indiscernible rank. Despite her low level, many of the level 65+ experts in the teleportation hall sensed danger the moment she arrived. They couldn't help but turn to look at the elegant girl, who appeared to be barely 20 years old. Tian Tong, do you really plan to compete for a private house in Stone Forest City? The starting bid is 30,000 credits. How can a student like you afford that? The level 56 female cleric, the level 60 female swordsman's companion, asked worriedly. If worse comes to worst, I'll just sell those items. Including what I have on me, I should have enough. My level isn't high enough yet, and I have no choice but to try if I want to level up quickly. Once I've caught up with the frontline experts' levels, it will be a different story, Tian Tong confidently replied as she glanced at the dilapidated longswords hanging at her waist. Her companions had nothing more to say about her ambitions and fell silent. They, more or less, understood the young woman's strength. She was a monster in human skin. If she hadn't joined God's domain so late, she might have already become famous in the game. The party then made their way to Dark Knight City's Candlelight trading firm to participate in the auction for Stone Forest City's private houses. Independent players and guild representatives did the same throughout the various kingdoms and empires. For a time, players squeezed into Candlelight's many shops. Even the various large guilds' upper echelons were shocked to see such massive gatherings of independent players, adventurer team members, and guild representatives. There sure are a lot of participants. I know, right? Well, who could possibly resist the temptation of grinding freely in the bottomless abyss? Honestly, I hadn't expected Zero Wing to lease its private houses. I had assumed the guild would keep them for its own members and bolster its strength. We have Starlink to thank for this. I've heard that Starlink has been spending insane amounts of money to poach Zero Wing's lifestyle players, and Zero Wing is suffering for it. The guild must have decided to rent Stone Forest City's private houses to alleviate some of the pressure. But how much can Zero Wing actually earn from renting the private houses? The amount of credits it rakes in will only be a drop in the bucket to Starlink. It might be a different story if Zero Wing sells the private houses, though. Doing so might give it a chance of contending with Starlink. The various powers' upper echelons attending the auctions were more than happy to watch Zero Wing and Starlink continue their feud and take advantage of the situation. Only, in their opinion, Zero Wing was trying to get itself killed by competing with Starlink's on a financial front. Giving up those lifestyle players would be a much wiser move. While Candlelight's guests chatted about the situation, its staff began the auction for Stone Forest City's private houses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Candlelight trading firm. First, I must inform you that due to the limited number of private houses in Stone Forest Town, our firm can only afford to lease a small number. Any player that wins a bid in this auction will gain priority bidding rights in the next. If two players bid the same value in the next auction, we will prioritize the player who has rented from us before. So, everyone, please take advantage of this opportunity, the Candlelight trading firm's auctioneer explained, smiling as she glanced over the crowd before her. Every guest gulped audibly and glowed with excitement. Players could grind to level 100 in the bottomless abyss, which would take more than 2 or 3 months. Needless to say, players would need to rent Stone Forest City's private houses for more than one. With prioritized bidding rights, players would have a massive advantage in the next auction. Now that we have that out of the way, let's start the auction for Stone Forest City's first private house. The starting bid is 30,000 credits. Each increment must be no lower than 500 credits. As the auctioneer finished speaking, the venue exploded with sound. 35,000. 40,000. Crap. Everyone's gone crazy. I bid 45,000. Don't compete with me. This one's mine. 50,000. Chapter 2181, God's Domain's Influence. Contrary to ordinary players' beliefs, the auctions for Stone Forest City's private houses had begun with a bang. The prices rapidly climbed as participants placed bids like they were fighting over cabbages. They shouted their bids with bloodshot eyes and fierce expressions as if they would take a bite out of anyone who outbid them. The tension in Dark Knight City's Candlelight trading firm was electric. Are you kidding me? This is just for 1 month of rent, yet someone's bidding 50,000 credits? Are these people insane? The level 56 female cleric sitting beside Tian Tong exclaimed, astonished. The original price, 30,000 credits, was already quite high, in her opinion. Stone Forest City's private houses were valuable, but they only made it easier for players to reach the bottomless abyss and load them to recover Stommy happy face and concentration slightly faster than normal. At most, players with a private house would only get to spend a little more time grinding in the regional dungeon than those without. Zero Wing should thank its stars that players were even willing to rent the houses for 30,000 credits, especially since not many players could afford the price, to begin with. Yet, Hundreds of players were placing one bid after another. Some players didn't get the chance to finish placing their bid before someone else's voice rose above theirs. In the blink of an eye, the first private house's price had risen to 50,000 credits, and that was just for a 1-month lease. No. They just recognized the value of Stone Forest City's private houses, Tian Tong said as she shook her head. In reality, being able to level up faster is a secondary benefit to them. I heard that the mana in the city is even denser than in the Divine Colosseum. Even after a short stay, players' minds sharpen, and their reaction speed increases. Being able to teleport back to their private houses from within the bottomless abyss will also allow players to spend more time training in the city. If players spend a fair amount of time training there, they might be able to improve their combat standards far faster than training elsewhere. Improving one's combat standards was the foundation for growing stronger in God's domain. Levels and equipment were only temporary measures. To a true expert, nothing was more important than improving their combat standards. This was also why Tian Tong wanted to rent her own private house in the city. While Tian Tong had explained the reason behind these players' passionate abandon to her companion, the bidding for the first private house had risen to 65,000 credits, which made the ordinary participant sigh with disappointment. 70,000. Tian Tong shouted. 80,000, a level 68 ranger almost immediately outbid Tian Tong. 200,000. This first house is mine, a level 69 berserker boldly declared. An uproar shook the venue as soon as the participants heard this berserker's bid. 200,000? That's enough to rent a mansion in a city. The Dark Knight Empire's 26th ranked berserker is here? No. I've heard that Fei Yu has defeated 2 of the Blood Jade family's peak experts. He's now ranked 23rd. Even superpowers have been trying to recruit him. It seems Fei Yu will claim Stone Forest City's first private house. The players present, especially the ordinary players, could not help but silently marvel at Fei Yu's imposing figure. They couldn't understand why an expert like him would be willing to spend 200,000 credits for a month-long claim to a private house in Stone Forest City. The man was simply insane. However, before the auctioneer could slam her gravel once, another voice rose through the clamor. 400,000 credits. The Blue Sky Adventurer team wants this house. I hope that you all can step aside out of respect, a level 70 shield warrior abruptly shouted. As one, the crowd turned toward this level 70 guardian knight, their mouths hanging open in shock. What? Empty Miracle is here, too? Blue Sky was the 5th-ranked adventurer team in the Dark Knight Empire, and Empty Miracle, the team's commander, was one of the Empire's top 10 guardian knights. It was rumored that his strength could even rival that of Superpower's peak experts. The man was a large part of the reason that Blue Sky had earned its current position. One of Starlink's elders had even tried to recruit Empty Miracle due to his impressive prowess and extraordinary achievements. He was undoubtedly a powerhouse in the Dark Knight Empire. This is an auction, Empty Miracle. Speak with your money. A robust, level 70 assassin suddenly stood from his seat. Our Windwolf adventurer team has no time for your nonsense. 500,000. 550,000. 600,000. 650,000. Blue Sky and Windwolf fought, outbidding one another for a time. The watching crowd fell silent as they watched. Do they really need to go this far? Isn't it just a private house? That's right. And this is only the first one. Aren't there still plenty available? Can't these 2 adventurer teams let others have a chance as well? No one understood why 2 of the Dark Knight Empire's top adventurer teams were so desperate to rent one of Stone Forest City's private houses that they'd continue to outbid each other. The auction had just begun, and Candlelight had promised to present multiple private houses. If the 2 adventurer teams were willing to set aside their differences, they could rent a private house for a much lower price. How can this be happening? Tian Tong's expression darkened as she watched the scene play out. She had sold one of her valuable treasures to increase her chances of winning a bid. Before she had arrived at the venue, she had collected 300,000 credits. She hadn't thought that she'd have any problems winning a private house with so much money on hand. She had even hoped to rent a private house until she reached level 100 with these funds, but now, she didn't even qualify to participate in the auction. In the end, Blue Sky's Empty Miracle had won the first private house for 860,000 credits, shocking every player in the venue. However, just as everyone believed that the astronomical price was only a result of Blue Sky and Windwolf butting heads and that the auction would continue at a far more reasonable pace. 500,000. 550,000. The moment the second private house's auction began, someone placed a bid for 500,000 credits. The second private house eventually sold for a total of 930,000 credits. The third and fourth private houses sold for 880,000 and 890,000 credits, respectively. Moreover, every winner was an adventurer team's commander. None of the ordinary participants had even had a chance. When the auctioneer announced the 11th private house, the various guild upper echelons in their VIP rooms made their move. 1 million. 1,200,000. Once the various guilds stepped in, the lowest closing price skyrocketed to 1,500,000 credits. This is insane. These people must be paid actors. Tian Tong's cleric companion exclaimed. They have to be. Tian Tong couldn't bring herself to agree with her friend, and neither could the other expert players in the venue. All of the auction's victors were respectable individuals in the Dark Knight Empire. Regardless of Zero Wing's reputation, it couldn't afford to hire so many VIPs to fight over these private houses so desperately. As the guild upper echelons continued to compete, many players realized why Blue Sky and Windwolf had fought so fiercely for the first private house. Obviously, the various guilds had decided to concede the first 10 private houses, which were more than enough for the Empire's top adventurer teams. So, independent players like us never had a chance of claiming Stone Forest City's private houses. Tian Tong couldn't help her bitter smile as she watched the Empire's guilds rent one private house after another. A similar scene played out in other kingdoms and Empire's Candlelight trading firms. For a time, a commotion erupted across God's domain. Chapter 2182, Frightening Wealth. When news of the auction for Stone Forest City's private houses had spread, God's domain's ordinary players began to wonder if the various guilds had lost their minds. Multiple guilds had willingly spent more than 1 million credits to rent a private house for a single month. With that kind of money, they could stay in a 7-star hotel for a month and still have plenty to spare. Yet, these guilds had spent so much to rent an ordinary private house. Crap. Those private houses are only convenient for travel. Do they really have to go this far? The day I own such a city in God's domain will be the day I become a wealthy tycoon. An act. This has to be an act. For a time, everyone in God's domain talked about the matter. Many players had even pushed back their grinding schedules to watch the auctions. When the game's other powers, those that weren't participating in the auctions, found out about the situation, they realized how frightening God's domain TMLY was. With the right opportunity, one could earn a truly terrifying amount of money through this game. Before this, most high-value transactions were conducted with coins. Although God's domain was quite realistic, and players could trade coins for credits, most people stuck with the idea that this was only a game. However, these players realized their mistake as Stone Forest City's private houses sold for credits. God's domain was more like another country in the real world than a game. As the private houses sold, one after another, an uproar shook Zero Wing to its core. Guild leader, we have already rented out 1,667 units. The lowest closing price is 600,000 credits, while the highest is 1,740,000 credits. We've officially earned more than 2 billion credits. Melancholic Smile energetically reported. She had assumed that they'd be lucky to earn enough to offer Candlelight's lifestyle players a stable monthly salary, but they hadn't even sold 1/3 of the houses they'd constructed, and they'd already earned far more than they had expected. They could even afford to replace the lifestyle players they had lost, not to mention retain the trading firm's current lifestyle players. Moreover, Stone Forest City's income restored the confidence their players had in Zero Wing and the Candlelight trading firm. In fact, advanced lifestyle players from other large guilds had begun to approach Candlelight, interested in joining the firm. Although Candlelight had been considered a sacred place for lifestyle players, Star Moon Kingdom's various large guilds had offered competitive wages to retain their players. This was the only reason that the kingdom's advanced lifestyle players hadn't flooded Candlelight. However, now that Candlelight offered advanced lifestyle players a monthly salary in credits, these players couldn't afford to ignore the trading firm. Ordinary people couldn't even dream of earning 20,000 credits per month. As long as an advanced lifestyle player joined the Candlelight trading firm, they wouldn't have to toil in a job they hated in the real world. Furthermore, they could earn 100,000 credits each month if they became a master lifestyle player. During the few hours the auction was happening, Candlelight had received applications from over 600 advanced lifestyle players and 5 master lifestyle players. With so many capable crafters, Candlelight wouldn't have to worry about its development stagnating. It seems I've underestimated these guilds and adventurer teams' desperation, Feng said. Even he was a little surprised to hear Melancholic Smile's report. He had expected the private houses to rake in more than the 50,000 credit record of his previous life. He had, after all, established Stone Forest City in the bottomless abyss far sooner than any town had done so in the past. Stone Forest City didn't have any competition either, so demand for its private houses would be far greater than normal. Still, he hadn't expected the demand to be this intensive. However, after giving the matter some more thought, Feng found the situation reasonable. Training, leveling, and treasure, the bottomless abyss ranked at the top in all 3 aspects. It was only natural that expert players would go mad over the regional dungeon, especially peak experts from the various large guilds. Chapter 2183, Private Houses Hidden Effect. Bottomless Abyss, Stone Forest City. As the auctions ended, the players that had won their bids made their way to their new properties. However, these experts were stunned after teleporting to their private houses. How is this possible? Everyone was astonished to find a new buff icon in their status window. High Mana State. While this buff was in effect, players would receive another buff that increased their maximum stamina and concentration by 20% for 12 hours after resting for 8 hours in their private houses. If players rested for 12 hours, the buff's duration would increase to 18 hours. These experts were ecstatic over the new discovery. In the bottomless abyss, stamina and concentration consumption rates were a player's biggest weakness. They could only grind in the God Mode regional dungeon if they found a way to maintain these stats. Now, they discovered that they could have 20% more stamina and concentration by simply resting for some time in their private houses. This would greatly extend their activity time and boost their leveling speed. The visiting expert players wasted no time in reporting this to their respective superiors. What's going on? Players can only accumulate the double EXP buff in Stone Forest City's hotels, but they can gain more stamina and concentration by relaxing in a private house? Doesn't that mean players with private houses will level 20% faster than players who don't have one? If that's the case, we have to get more private houses tomorrow. For a time, the various powers received notifications regarding the private houses' hidden effect, re-evaluating their previous opinions. The various powers had only viewed Stone Forest City's private houses as a convenient travel tool, but now that they had learned that these houses could increase players' stamina and concentration, they had taken on a whole new meaning. If they could secure 20 private houses and send an entire team to take advantage of this buff, the team's leveling speed would be far faster than a mere 20% boost allowed. The combat power an individual could exhibit was on a different level than fighting with a team. Moreover, players would drastically reduce their stamina and concentration consumption rates by fighting alongside teammates. If an entire team had a 20% maximum stamina and concentration buff, they'd be able to last in the bottomless abyss for more than 30% longer than teams without the buff. With so much more time, the team could explore more of the dungeon, reducing the number of competitors it would face. Much of the bottomless abyss's first floor was home to dark demon-kin, as well. These dark demon-kin looked similar to humans, but unlike humans, magic circuits covered these demonkins' entire bodies. They also bore a third eye on their foreheads, and they had an affinity for mana that rivaled the elves. Factoring in the bottomless abyss's environment, a random level 65, chieftain-ranked dark demon-kin could effortlessly defeat ordinary expert players. If an expert party encountered a lord-ranked dark demon-kin, the party would lose half of its members before it killed the monster if it didn't react appropriately. To make matters worse, dark demon-kin were very difficult to sense unless players spotted them. They were skilled with ambush tactics and hid their auras with magic. When exploring the bottomless abyss, players had to remain on high alert, which substantially increased their stamina and concentration consumption rates. Unfortunately, players had no other choice, as even refinement realm experts would die if they weren't careful. This situation instilled a deep fear for the various powers teams, making them hesitant to venture too far into the first floor. They constantly worried that they wouldn't have enough stamina and concentration for the return trip, and if that happened, they'd likely die and lose several days of effort. Thus, the various powers expert teams had remained in the first floor's outer region so far. However, if an entire team had the buff stone forest city's private houses provided, they could easily venture farther into the first floor. God's Domain's powers immediately began to collect their funds. Because Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow had been bogged down with the guild's affairs, they hadn't been able to devote themselves to their training fully. Hence, they were shy of reaching the flowing water realm, but it was only a matter of time before they crossed the threshold as well. Unfortunately, Zero Wing's recent development had brought a lot of issues to the surface. Due to the sudden loss of so many internal members, the guild wasn't able to raid as many dungeons or complete as many field operations as before. As a result, the gap between the guild's upper and lower hierarchies grew. If this persisted, Zero Wing's development would start to stagnate. It's about time that I set up that training center. Inspecting the guild's current funds, Feng decided that he couldn't set the matter aside any longer. God's Domain's various large guilds in the past had either had access to their own training centers or partnered with already established centers. Not only had this provided fresh blood, but it had also earned these guilds a stable income. Only the guilds with strong support from training centers or dojos had had a chance of becoming overlords in the game. Without that support, stronger competitors had stifled their development. He was dazed when he saw the skyscraper. The Century Training Center? How can this be? Xiao Yu stared up at the towering building in utter shock. As the Big Dipper Group's chairman and someone who dreamed of opening a training center in a first-tier city, Xiao Yu knew a little about Fenglin City's training centers and dojos. He recognized the Century Training Center the moment he arrived. Chapter 2185, Experts Gather. Fenglin City, Redstone Restaurant. A thin, middle-aged man respectfully entered one of the restaurant's top-floor VIP rooms. Once inside, he approached an indifferent youth who currently meditated. Although the young man sat there quietly, he felt like the room's overlord. Any enemy of his would become everyone's enemy in the room. "Why are you in such a hurry, old Zhua?" Feng asked as he opened his eyes, glancing up at the middle-aged man. "I've just received news that Zero Wing is opening a training center in Fenglin City. Moreover, it purchased one of the city's well-known training centers to do so," the butler, Zhuolingqiu, reported. "Interesting. It seems Zero Wing is quite capable, after all. I had thought that the organization would run to me for help once it faced a financial crisis. I hadn't expected it to earn a fortune through leasing Stone Forest City's private houses. And now, it's even opening its own training center," Feng calmly mused. "Young master, although Zero Wing can afford to open a training center, how can setting one up in Fenglin City be so easy?" Zhuolingqiu commented disdainfully. According to our information, Lu Xinglua has prepared for this and hired a particularly skilled expert. By the sounds of it, he wants his expert to cause a ruckus in the training center, preventing it from taking root in the city. It was true that one needed enough capital to open a training center, but money wasn't enough to keep one alive. One also needed sufficient strength to defend it, especially in a city as competitive as Fenglin. In that case, I want you to visit Zero Wing's new training center. At the end of the day, we can still use the organization to slow Starlink down, Feng said as he sent a glance at Zhuolinqiu. Understood. With a bow, Zhuolinqiu turned and left the room. Meanwhile, news of Heaven's Rumble Training Center's grand opening shook Fenglin City's fighting industry. With the Starline Corporation's Lu Xinglua targeting Zero Wing, no one dared to ally with the organization for fear of attracting the corporation's ire. Now that Zero Wing had opened its own training center, even a fool knew that Lu Xinglua would make his move. At least it would be interesting to watch. Moreover, the various training centers and dojos throughout the city viewed the fact that this company, which focused its business within virtual reality games, was trying to make a name for itself in Fenglin City's fighting industry as both foolish and a blatant insult. Even on the off chance that Lu Xinglua left Zero Wing's training center alone, they wouldn't let the organization get away with this transgression. Otherwise, they become laughingstocks in the industry. While the various training centers and dojos discussed Zero Wing's new facility, Xiaoyu had been methodically planning the Heaven's Rumble Training Center's grand opening. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Not only had Xiaoyu purchased the latest training and medical equipment available over the last 3 days, but he had also invited many of Fenglin City's VIPs to attend the grand opening. Fortunately, he had far more connections than a young man like Feng. On the day in question, luxury cars stopped by the building's entrance in droves, and many passers-by grew interested in visiting the training center as a result. However, most of the people that visited Heaven's Rumble Training Center that day were young, passionate fighters. They had all seen the advertisements boasting Heaven's Rumble's state-of-the-art facilities, and they were curious to inspect the training center themselves. The world's technology constantly improved, and with the help of proper data analysis, one could build the best training routine possible, improving far faster than training under a famous instructor. Isn't that Luo Qianqing, who won 3rd place in Fenglin City's annual fighting competition last year? Quick, look! It's Master Yang from the Extreme Light Dojo. I've heard rumors that he stopped participating in public events to prepare for the international fighting competition. Am I seeing things? Isn't that Chen Tianhe, the Martial Heart Dojo's master? I thought he already retired from the public scene. Why is he here? What kind of power does this training center have behind it? With so many of Fenglin City's experts gathered, the young men and women who visited the training center out of curiosity grew excited. They even wondered if they had stumbled upon Fenglin City's annual fighting competition, rather than a new training center's grand opening. Why else would so many well-known experts be here? While the young fighting enthusiasts were shocked over finding so many of the city's VIPs in one place, a group consisting of 2 young women and a young man entered the hall, immediately attracting everyone's attention. The reaction was mostly due to the 2 young women. One wore an elegant, white dress, which highlighted her long, flowing hair and exquisite appearance. She had the body of a goddess, and many of the women in the crowd became self-conscious. A second exceptional beauty in a bright, red dress stood next to her. When the 2 women entered the hall, they instantly became the center of attention. Even the young man that accompanied these women was exceptionally handsome, and many of the ladies in the hall swooned. The handsome young man was the previous year's champion of Fenglin City's annual fighting competition, known for possessing a talent that only emerged once a decade in the city. He had also qualified to participate in the international fighting competition, and his status as the heir to the Zhang clan group, one of the city's top 5 financial groups, was just icing on the cake. Qingxue, most of these experts don't seem to be here with honest intentions. I'm afraid that this friend of yours will have a very difficult time maintaining a training center in Fenglin City, Zhang Wuya told by Kingswell as he glanced over the crowd. If your friend can't handle the pressure, I'm willing to step up for him. I suspect that most of these training centers and dojos will take a step back out of respect. Feng is an internal force expert as well, Big Brother Zhang. Shouldn't he be able to handle the situation? Zhao Yueru asked. An internal force expert might be impressive in second and third tier cities, but this is Fenglin City. Every well-known training center and dojo in the city has its own internal force expert. Moreover, they are experienced veterans. Their accomplishments with internal force are far more impressive than a youngster who has just mastered the techniques, Zhang Wuya explained. Bai Qingxue and Zhao Yueru's expressions darkened slightly after listening to their companion. They had never thought that opening a training center would be so difficult. While Bai Qingxue's group chatted amongst themselves, another commotion rattled the crowd in the main hall. An imposing bear of a man entered the room. 2 knife scars decorated his face, and his arrival shocked many of the training centers and dojo's upper echelons. The instant this man appeared, many of the training center and dojo upper echelons present could not help but reveal shocked expressions. Why is he here? When Zhang Wuya saw the new arrival, fear flashed in his eyes. Is he someone powerful? Zhao Yueru asked when she noticed Zhang Wuya's trepidation. Powerful? Zhang Wuya shook his head. That word is no longer sufficient. He's practically a devil. He has earned the nickname, T-Rex, for how heavy-handed he is in combat. No fewer than 20 internal force experts have suffered defeat at his hands. Some of them are still lying in their hospital beds. He was banned from the fighting world for that very reason. Most of that happened more than a decade ago, but according to recent rumors, it seems he has defeated another internal force expert overseas. I don't even think I can stop him if he tries to make a move. While everyone made a fuss, Wang T-Rex Zhongxuan stepped into the center of the hall. I've heard that Heaven's Rumble has set up shop here. Who's in charge? I, Wang Zhongxuan, want to spar. I want to see whether or not Heaven's Rumble qualifies to do business in Fenglin City. Wang Zhongxuan shouted, his voice echoing throughout the hall. Most people immediately took a step back. Heaven's Rumble is doomed. I doubt anyone in Fenglin City can save it now that this demon has shown up. The Starline Corporation is certainly powerful. It's even hired this monster to cause trouble. Zero Wing should have just stayed in its virtual reality game instead of meddling in the fighting industry. As the various training centers and dojos experts watched Wang Zhongxuan, they knew that Heaven's Rumble Training Center would soon go out of business. It would also be the first training center to close on the same day it opened. Suddenly, however, a crisp voice rang out over the crowd's muttering. I don't know who you are, but I'm afraid that you don't qualify to challenge our hall master. Instinctively, the crowd turned toward the voice's origin. The speaker was a graceful, mesmerizing woman, and none other than Fire Dance's player. He had gone to great lengths to employ Chen Tianhe's help to ensure that Heaven's Rumble Training Center would have a home in Fenglin City. He had even called in the favor the old man had owed him for so many years. But now, that youngster, Feng, is really pitiful. He grasped internal force at such a tender age, yet he will have to face Wang Zhongxuan, Chen Tianhe lamented, sighing as he stared at the monstrous, scarred man. Feng had definitely earned the title genius for grasping internal force, despite being in his early 20s. If he did not teach this girl a proper lesson, he'd become a laughingstock. The state of Heaven's Rumble is none of your concern. You can talk after you defeat me. Fire Dance stepped forward, and her fist shot straight toward Wang Zhongxuan. His face instantly turned beet red as he stumbled a few steps back before dropping down to one knee. Internal force. She's an internal force expert. Upon seeing Wang Zhongxuan's kneeling figure, the spectating crowd could not help but turn to stare at the completely unharmed Fire Dance in shock. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.